All right, I have muted everyone, so we should be good to go.
Gotcha. 7:01. Let's call this planning session to order. Planning meeting to order. Okay. See, should we do the approval of last meeting's minutes? You're on mute, Nick.
Do roll call attendance. Let's figure out who's all here. So.
Okay. I have myself, Damian Young. Aye. Let's see, John.
Aye.
Mike.
Yes, aye.
Steve.
Aye.
And Gary.
Aye.
Awesome.
You can run through staff too.
Okay.
Mike Olson, city planner, I'm here.
Chris.
City Clerk Chris Lindquist is here. And then we should have council member, is it Kathleen with us?
Kathleen Refkin, yep.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you. All right. Are you good with roll call, Chris?
Yes, I am.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. So should we do the approval of last meeting's minutes?
Do the agenda.
Oh, the agenda.
Yep, approve the agenda first. Start.
All right. Can we get someone to approve the agenda?
I so approve as submitted.
I second. This is Steve.
Okay, Gary Pettis, did you make that motion?
I did.
Thank you. Okay, Damian, do you want me to do the roll call or do you want to do the roll call?
Can you go ahead and do the roll call?
Sure.
That way, yeah.
Chair Damian Young,
Aye.
Gary Pettis,
Aye.
John Sturgis,
Aye.
Mike Kirkwood.
Abstain.
Okay, because you were not here at the last meeting.
I was not present at the meeting.
But you're approving this agenda for this
yeah,
meeting.
I'm okay
For the
with it.
next one, you'll abstain.
All right, sorry.
Okay, nope, that's fine. And then Steve Livermore.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0. And then I'd have to look to see who's all absent, but that's okay.
And then, Nick, we move to the approval of last the meeting minutes.
Correct, yep.
All right.
I approve.
Can we get a motion to approve last session's meeting?
I approve.
I think that was John.
That was John.
Yes.
We get a second?
I'll second. Gary Pettis.
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll go through the roll call vote. Is there something that somebody else wanted to say?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, Damian Young,
Aye.
Gary Pettis,
Aye.
John Sturgis,
Aye.
Mike Kirkwood.
Now I need to abstain, right? Because I wasn't there.
Yeah, this is the one you can abstain to.
All right.
Okay, and Steve Livermore.
Aye.
Okay, so it'll be 4-0-1. Okay, good to go with your public hearings, Damian.
Awesome. So we move on to the public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Correct.
the first thing on the agenda?
Yep, so the first item on the agenda is the preliminary plat with variances for the property at 4,000 Enchanted Lane. I'll give a little bit of a background here. I do know we have our applicant here who I think will give a little bit of a presentation afterwards, and then we'll open it up for questions of the commission, for staff, and for the applicant. And then we'll move towards the public hearing, which will give anyone in the audience here a chance to speak on the item, should they so wish. We'll close that public hearing, have some final discussion amongst ourselves, and then seek a motion regarding this application. So, like I said, I'll lead off with a little bit of a background. As I'm sure the Planning Commission will remember, this property recently went through a comprehensive plan amendment to change the guiding from a park public, semi-public to a residential low. At that time, the applicants did share some concepts, one being the 6-lot plan, which is in front of you this evening. So it's something the commission should be familiar with. So I won't go too much background on the comp plan amendment since that's kind of been discussed, but we're looking at roughly a 7 to 8 acre gross site. But once you take out all the floodplain, right-of-way dedication, wetlands, things of the like, you're looking at a 6 acre net site. And the applicant is proposing 6 lots. With those 6 lots, there are 3 lots that are deficient in the street side lot width requirement of 100 feet. So that included with this request is a variance from that lot standard. And in your staff report, that's kind of where I started in the discussion, was justifying that variance request. And staff feels, based on the information submitted by the applicant, that that criteria is satisfied. And also, I think they kind of got a little bit of a direction during the comp plan process that the 6 lot was kind of the preferred path forward of the city. So moving past the variance, one of the other key items to discuss is there are some encumbrances on the neighboring properties. It includes a shed and a gravel driveway or parking surface. It's the city's understanding that the applicant has been working with that property owner, and they may have even came to a conclusion on how they will remedy that situation. But we wanted to have that on the record and in the staff report as, you know, kind of our interpretation of what's going to happen. Essentially, there's going to be a portion of land sold from the property being developed to the neighbor. That'll occur as a simple subdivision at the same time at the final plat approval. So that's something that the Planning Commission themselves will not need to review. Simple subdivisions where no new lots are created are handled through the City Council. But there is a depiction in your staff report that shows what's going to happen, and that adjacent lot, I think it's lot 6, will, even after the simple subdivision, maintain all the required lot standards of lot width, depth, area, etc. So we're not creating another deficient lot. They'll be able to maintain that requirement. Moving forward to the park discussion, the Parks Commission at their May 11th meeting discussed the park dedication requirement. Looking here, it's a based on the zone density, it's an 11% requirement. That's either of the buildable land or a cash in lieu fee. And the Parks Commission ultimately recommended the City Council consider cash in lieu for the park dedication requirement. And city ordinance states that a maximum of $25,000 per lot is the maximum on that fee. And the applicant has said that they're willing to pay that amount. So 6 lots at $25,000 per lot results in what would be a $150,000 park dedication fee. So that was the recommendation of the Parks Commission in their review of this application. Moving forward onto the trees, in your staff report, I've outlined the city's tree preservation ordinance, and then provided some information based on the submittals of the applicant, kind of outlining the number of trees and caliper inches on site, what they're proposing to remove, what they are allowed to remove, as well as looking at some significant tree credit, which is something that the Planning Commission should discuss this evening. City ordinance allows for double credit on especially significant trees should the applicant prove they're going above and beyond standard tree preservation in order to protect the health of those trees. And the applicant in their narrative have outlined several, I guess, items and how they will preserve those trees. I won't go to those in greater detail unless there is some questions of the Planning Commission, but staff feels that criteria has been satisfied and feels that it is certainly acceptable to warrant giving them that credit. And should you do that, the applicant will be complying with the tree preservation ordinance. In the event that removal is not, or that protection is not deemed worthy of the double credit, in your staff report, that's 321.5 inches, or what would be $32,150 at the rate of $100 per inch, that they would need to replace or pay that fee. And then basically in your staff report, the next steps are the stormwater, sanitary sewer, and the water system. Those are mostly covered in the city engineer's memorandum. Should you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those. The biggest one is the water system. This lot is not currently accessing city water, nor do we anticipate it anytime in the near future. Therefore, it would seem to make sense that charging the water fee is not reasonable given the uncertainty of the future. However, we would anticipate flagging this property and these lots should the city water become available. They'll pay not only the connection charge, but whatever area charge is necessary to allow for water at that area. That's obviously something that the Planning Commission, ultimately City Council, can discuss and determine what they feel makes the most sense. And then the last item is the streets. There's no proposed street improvements, but the applicant is dedicating right away over the existing Enchanted Lane as part of their plat. So in advance of this meeting, staff sent notices to all property owners within 500 feet. We did not receive any written comments regarding this request. However, again, there is that public hearing this evening for those that are present that wish to speak. So with that being said, like I said, I'm here for any questions, and then I think the applicant would like to give a little bit of a presentation, but the Planning Commission should consider all the information in front of them, the entire record, hold a public hearing, take testimony from anyone who is looking to hear or to speak or be heard on this item. And then once that's completed, we should close the public hearing, have final discussion, and then seek a motion regarding this plat. The recommended action here this evening would be to approve the 6-lot subdivision with variances, subject to a list of conditions in your staff report. So I guess first off, does anyone on the Planning Commission have questions of myself as staff? Otherwise, then I'll turn it over to our applicant and let them supplement what I've provided for you.
Nick, I just have a question.
Yep.
I see on your material something about whether the applicant is to pay some sort of fee for an emergency siren.
Correct.
There's one that's only half a mile away from where they are. Is this would be an additional one, or are they donating?
Correct. Every plat is required to pay $64 per unit. That would go towards the maintenance and upkeep and so on of the sirens. It's a requirement, regardless if there's sufficient coverage or not. It just goes to the help cover other areas in the future.
It's not an additional siren. It's just support for the system.
Correct. Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
I had a question. Is that that addition with the neighbor's property, is that taken away from the 2 lots that are deficient, or that's saying, so it's only 1 lot that's deficient, or is it?
No. So I think there's a total of 3 lots, and there, I guess what would be the northwestern 3 lots are deficient in the lot width. The adjacent lot, I believe lot 6, will maintain and will meet all the requirements of the city lot in the Shoreland Overlay District with the R1 zoning designation. So the encumbrances and the transaction between the neighbor and the applicant does not impact that adjacent lot. The other 3 lots, remain deficient either way.
Now, Nick, this is Steve. I had a question about the where they're cutting out that piece of the land. It looks like some of those trees are within that space. So does the tree thing start first, and then the land gets subdivisioned over to the other home or the other homeowner? How's that work?
That's a good question. I guess we'll have to review that in further detail. Because, I mean, obviously, I suppose the preliminary plat is as presented, so I suppose we would consider the trees as is, and the final plat would be reflective of the post lot line adjustment situation. So in my discussions with the city attorney, that would be a consistent enough, minor enough change, as long as the city's aware and it's documented, that we would be okay with that.
Okay,
And
thank you, Nick.
the question I have is, it's a small peninsula, essentially, right? Are we trying to, would 5 lots be more appropriate, for that area? We wouldn't have to worry about the narrow lots. Did we put that in consideration?
That's certainly something for the planning commission to discuss. If you'll recall, the applicant did present an 8-lot plan, which would involve the installation of a cul-de-sac. That has not been reviewed in great detail. However, on the surface, that certainly may be a conforming situation. So I think the alternate to 6 lots might be 8. I don't know that the alternate to 6 might be 5, but that's something the planning commission can certainly discuss. But like I said, I mean, I haven't looked at the 8 lot, with a fine tooth comb, but my indications are, I mean, that could be your alternative, is an 8 lot situation.
I remember the 8 lots very well, and when it came to 8 or 6, I think, and from my perspective, my opinion was that we had preferred the 6. So I was just asking in regards to the narrow lots, and is that going to be, are we trying to do too much there?
Hey, Damien, this is Steve. I think what's driving that, right, is the lake frontage.
Yeah.
The lake frontage, yeah, certainly, suitable for 6. It's just kind of with the unique shape of the lot and how it, pies is probably the wrong term, but it definitely tapers as you get towards Enchanted, and it just squeezes it ever so much that, so I mean, it's this plat checks, 8, 9 out of 10 boxes. So, I think they've done reasonably the best they could given the circumstances, especially when you look at the alternative potentially being an 8 lot split with a cul-de-sac. I think, if the city is, as it's done historically, striving to remain rural through development, I think this might be a reasonable way to accommodate that.
Great.
Well, and we'll know better when we see the presentation, but it sounds to me like it's going to average about an acre a lot with about 2 acres of wetlands. But we'll know better when Paul gives his presentation. So yeah, unless it gets really tight, I initially don't have as much concern, but I'll wait until I see Paul's presentation.
Gary, did you have a comment?
No, I think they've, done a nice job of bringing back what we requested of them. I mean, that's what we asked them to do, is come back with something with 6 lots. So I'm good now, but thank you, Damon.
Thank you. Any other?
Damien?
Yes.
Damien, could you request people to put their phones back on or their computers on mute? I'm hearing a lot of bird noise and it's hard to understand people. Somebody must be sitting outside. Which is
We've got-
fine. It's just that.
Can you put that person on mute, NA?
I think, Gary, we're picking up some background noise on your phone. I'm gonna put you on mute if that's
Yep.
all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, if we can open it up to Paul for presentation. Paul, if you're going to go ahead and speak, can you go ahead and your name and address, please?
Paul Robinson, 5433 DuPont Avenue South, Minneapolis.
Thank you.
Nick, do you want to try giving me control again?
Let me see if I can figure this out here. Let's see here. Hold on 1 second. Uh-oh, I kicked him out on accident. Uh-oh, that's not good. Yeah, hopefully he'll call back in. I accidentally did that incorrectly. See if he can rejoin. Give it 1 moment here.
Yeah, we'll take your time, no rush.
I'm still learning this very much. Hopefully he understands to call back in, and hopefully he can get back in.
You're going to be perfect with it, Nick, and then we won't need it.
Yeah,
Right?
the pandemic is over.
I don't. Sorry, Paul. I accidentally kicked you instead of. I wanted to take you off presenter, and it instead booted you. I did not mean that. So I'm gonna try to make you a presenter here. You're on mute, by the way, Paul.
I was at
So
the
if you're
city of
yelling
Minnetonka.
at me, you're on mute. I didn't hear it.
No, I was at the city of Minnetonka, and somebody actually kiboshed the entire meeting. So,
Did that work?
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I pick the right screen. We'll find out here. Oh, good. All right, I think we're there. All right.
So hopefully,
Okay.
I mean, maybe you can give a little bit of a, if needed, some people are on phone only, so maybe we can give a little bit of a background when and where possible.
As far as what they're looking at?
Correct, if it's needed. If not,
Okay.
that's okay. Maybe
Okay.
the text
All
will
right.
speak for itself.
So I'll start again. So Chair Young, Planning Commissioners, Paul Robinson with the Bancorp Group. I'm here this evening with David Newman, who's the president of the Bancorp Group, and Joel Cooper, who's been the engineer on this project. So both are here this evening. If any questions come up that we need to tap them for. I think a number of you, I gave more of an introduction about what Bancorp did and what our company has done in the past, but I think the biggest project, obviously, that most of you are familiar with is Woodland Cove that we've been developing for Carlson Company right here in Minnetrista. So as we've talked about, the gross acres, the gross site about 7.7 acres, but really the heart of the project is about 6 acres. There's 655 feet of shoreline. It's owned by the Masonic Temple. It's been a camp since 1973. And it is currently, as Nick mentioned, guided and zoned for R1 and for low density residential. When we first looked at the property or purchased the property or got under contract, we looked at the FEMA floodplain. We knew there was going to be some floodplain on the property, and so we were prepared for that. I think when we did our first survey, we were a little surprised at how much of the area was in the floodplain. It wasn't necessarily a surprise to the neighbors because they've seen water reach, into these areas. The floodplain shown here in green is actually the 931.5, which is the Minnehaha Creek's floodplain elevation, which is quite a bit higher than actually the lake's ever gotten to. So in 2014, was the highest recorded water level, which was 931.1. And so not all of this area gets wet today, but it is considered in the floodplain according to the rules. This next slide, again, we have to meet the strictest rule. So the strictest rule is for Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. So anytime we're filling anything that's under 931.5, we have to provide compensatory storage. So we have to provide an area where we can store that water somewhere on our site. And so we're currently storing it in these 3 areas shown. Water won't go into these areas until the lake is at a 921.5. So when it reaches 921.5, water will start to go into these areas. There's an equalizer pipe right here. So water will, at the same moment, basically fill both of these basins. And then there's a little basin over on the side here. The water in these areas will hold up to 931.5, but again, I just said, the highest the lake's ever been is a 931.1, so they're unlikely to actually ever like fill completely. And I think that if you think about the lake, generally, I'll just be kind of on average. In the spring, the lake starts at the average high around 929.4 or a little bit above after spring melt. And then on a typical year, it kind of loses water as it goes through to the fall, and it's maybe a half a foot to a foot down in the fall. Now, of course, it bumps all over the place, and there's lots of outliers, but that's kind of an average year. One of the comments that I brought up at the public hearing for the comp plan was that there may be an eagle's nest in the area, and so we did hire an ecologist to go do a nesting study and observe for eagle's nests, and there was an eagle's nest about 2 doors down. So we completed the nesting study. We contacted the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and based on the location of the nest and how close it is to Enchanted and how habituated the eagles have become to activity, we were told we would not need to get a nesting disturbance permit. But we did go through the process after the last public hearing to resolve that. This goes back to where we showed, these are a little bit more refined, but these were the two plans that we basically had at the comp plan amendment process, where we had the 8-lot plan and the 6-lot plan. Again, we decided to go forward with the 6-lot plan for a number of reasons. The impact to the adjacent neighbors is basically very similar, less. There's fewer lots overall, so less impact just to the neighborhood in general. It's similar, and you'll see this in a moment, to the flag lots that are to the east. There's no road cost, so there's kind of a win-win there too, as far as there's not a road for us to build, but also for the city to maintain, to plow, all the infrastructure. It reduced the amount of tree removal, and so again, this kind of felt like after we went through the process last time, that was where kind of the direction we were getting the most feedback on, and internally we thought that made the most sense.
Excuse me, Paul.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, does this include the extension of the neighbor's lot? I'm gonna talk about that right now. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so I actually decided to put this right up front. I moved it from what you have in your packet. So so the area that we're talking about is this red area. It's about 3 feet all the way along the edge of the property, and then it encompasses this shed and a little bit of the storage area around the shed. It's about 7,000 square feet total. And what I tried to show here is you can see that it still meets the 100-foot or more in every one of the critical locations. So this is still a compliant lot, even after we would take this out of the plat area, it wouldn't affect the layout or the compliance of the plat. Is that the question you had?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. So, and I'm showing it now so that when you look at, I didn't change it on every single slide going forward. That's why I put it up front. So you could just kind of imagine in your mind this little area gone from the rest of my slides. So again, overall, R1 is 14,500, shoreland area is 23,000. So we're almost 50% greater on all lots than the minimum requirement for the shoreland area. And just like I said, this lot here went from 68,000 to 61, but it's still a very, very large lot. If you look at that and just try to understand the neighborhood context, like, does this fit within the context? And our lots are between 32,000 and 68,000 or 61,000. If you look at the 4 lots adjacent, those lots range, and on this side of Enchanted, on the south side of Enchanted, between 18,000 and 45,000. And so I think from a neighborhood context for the lot size, I feel like we fit very well within the context. If you look at the setbacks and where we meet the setbacks, we meet it at the ordinary high. We meet the front yard setback, which is 75 feet back from the lake, 100 feet. This isn't really a formal measurement, but we, in almost all instances, have 100 or more at the sort of angle point. And then for the rear yard setback or the street side setback, lots 3 through 6 all have 100 or more. And it's really these 3 lots where the property where we had to tip it to have these flag lots. And in part it's because they're especially long, but where we have these flag lots where we have a reduction under 100. And so if you look at just all of the requirements, front yard setback, side yard setback, rear, we meet all of the requirements. We're not asking for any flexibility. The only place is really those 3, just the rear yard on those 3 lots. And so then I just wanted to show you how that kind of maybe fits within the neighborhood context. If you were to look at what we're requesting, that's these 3 lots right here, 58 feet through 69. It's not identical, but it does kind of mimic in a way these flag lots that were adjacent to that also had to narrow their lots when they got to Enchanted in that sort of 50 to 60 foot range. So we think it's pretty similar to that. It also, like I said before, has to do with the characteristics of the property and what Nick said as far as it tapering slightly to the rear, which is just the shape of the property that we have. And this variance overall allows and accommodates for a reduction in density. One of the other comments that came up during the presentation we made at the comprehensive plan was just how drainage was going to be handled on the site. And so we have to comply with the rules that are today, and have and treat all of the stormwater on the property. And so there's a number of ponds that we're creating along the back of the property, and the drainage generally flows from the back of these lots to those ponds, and then we'll eventually drain off-site. We have one pipe that goes underneath Enchanted, and then we have a couple that direct back to the lake out on the front side, on the south side. We also have been meeting with both Bruce and Carol Olson and Steve and Pam Anderson on just issues adjacent to the property. And so we've been working with Bruce. We're going to remove this retaining wall between the 2 properties, but it's just a couple feet tall. And we're going to basically combine the yards at that same elevation that the top of their wall is, and then create a shared swale, so all the water will then just drain down the property line toward the lake. And so in addition to that, there's some low areas along his sheet piling on his slip that we're going to just help fill in so that the water doesn't collect in that area anymore, and do a couple other small things. But that's kind of the arrangement and agreement that Bruce and I came up with. And then on the north side of Bruce's property, there's an area along here where there's some dips and bumps. There's some stumps that need to be ground out. And so we're going to grind the stumps and kind of fill in to make sure that this area drains better. What we're trying to do is take a majority of the water and kind of curve it around this green, which is a big silver maple, like 68-inch silver maple. We're trying to save that silver maple. And to that end, Bruce is okay with some of the drainage in this area continuing to go to his lot like it does today, because he also has an evergreen tree here, which have stumps that or roots that come across the property. And so if we were to try to grade in here, we probably would kill potentially both of these trees. So that's kind of what we're working out together between Bruce and I. If we go over to Pam and Steve Anderson's property, we have this shared area along their wall, which is, if you remember that slide way in the beginning of the floodplain area, all of this, all the way up to this wall, all this area is floodplain today. And it's kind of bumpy. It's not the best draining area. And so we're trying to create a high point right here, this 931.5, and take as much of the drainage as we can, either back to that ponding area in the rear or toward the lake. And so we know it's not going to be perfect, because right now the only way probably to do it perfectly would be to remove all the vegetation along the bottom of the wall and kind of grade up to the wall and create a perfect crown there. But we're going to do what we can to make the drainage the best as possible and work with the buyer of lot 6. So if we need to put in some drain tile or do some other things to help the drainage go in each direction, that's the conversation that we're still having and continuing to have with the Andersons to come up with a sort of a mutual solution in this area. And then just on the north side of the Andersons, kind of where we abut the Andersons driveway, most of this water today drains onto the camp property. It'll continue to drain onto the camp property into this ponding area. So another item that has come up, came up in the public hearing, came up when anybody actually just sort of passes by and sees me standing there. They talk about burial mounds and if there's burial mounds on the property. And so we are following the state statute, which is 307.08, which for any site that is like Enchanted Island, that's an alpha site where there's been evidence of human remains found, you need to go through this process before you do any digging, and that's what we've done. So we conducted this paper research. We then created a plan to do some initial investigation for the potential of burial mounds. Then we had that plan approved by the Indian Affairs Council, the Historical Society, the state archaeologist. And the first step was a geophysical examination where they basically walk over the whole site with a tool that reads for any disturbance in the ground. And then that highlighted areas that needed further investigation, which we followed up doing probes and then shovel testing where they actually dig a big hole and actually sift all of the dirt through the hole, dirt through it that came out of the hole. And through all that, there's no evidence of any burial mounds or any evidence that there would be burial mounds. And so that was then brought back to the three organizations, and what we were directed to do is just put together a monitoring plan. So we'll have an archaeologist on site while we're doing our grading, and we'll have a contingency plan in case by chance we do end up finding a burial mound. We'll have a plan in place for how to address it. I know that's kind of long, but we're getting close to the end now. So so then we're talking about tree preservation, as Nick brought up. The gray trees are the ones that we're removing, and to no surprise, a lot of them are near and around the paths, the building paths. The saved trees, we're saving quite a few around the perimeter of the site. And then we did work to try to save 3 areas of especially significant trees, and I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. And then in addition to that, we're planting 50 trees to help sort of create a buffer around the site and adjacent to the neighbors. So as Nick mentioned, we're about 459 caliper inches short. We're replacing or planting 137, and we're asking for credit for the remaining of our balance. And so we have 2 areas. This first credit area up here, I don't know if you can remember back to the slide where I showed the 8-lot plan, but our original floodplain mitigation area actually kind of ventured up a little bit. It was a little skinnier and longer, and it came up into this area. And so we pulled that back. We also, because it was skinnier, we also had the driveway kind of coming through the woods here. And so we pulled that driveway away. We also were trying to leave a little bit of area in case we worked out on a compromise with the land with Steve, which we have. And then kind of what added to the sort of the final straw on that was that there's the eagle's nest. And so keeping all these trees here also helped create that buffer to the eagle's nest. So we felt like we've done a nice job of trying to save this corner of trees and keep it. And all of the significant trees are not on the that red area I showed earlier. So they're not on the property or portion of the property that Steve's going to be getting. And then the other credit areas were these 2 areas right here where we made the driveway steeper. So we pulled all the grading back so that so that the driveway doesn't get as close to the trees. We also pushed each driveway over. So we pushed that driveway over to the side. We pushed this driveway kind of through the middle here. And so we went to some effort to try to save both of these clumps as well, just so that the site still had some remaining mature trees. And then again, this is that sliver that we talked about up front. This area of property, I didn't talk about this before, but there's a wall, maybe the landscaping, the shed, which we've all talked about. Nick brought up that the way to handle this is going to be through a simple subdivision and then lot combination, and that will be part of our final plat process. And then just as a quick summary, kind of with a little bit more of a rendering. So we have the 6 lake lots, we have those stormwater treatment areas, the floodplain mitigation areas, kind of our home pads, driveways to access the site, the saved existing trees, our mitigation trees, and which sort of final, create the palette that we're trying to get approved this evening. So that's the end of my presentation. And I can take any questions now or after you open or close the public hearing, whenever is convenient.
Gary, I took you off mute if you have any questions.
No, not yet. I'll save my thing for discussion. The ones I have so far, I think, are more discussion points.
I think I was reading Gary's mind, but I know Gary's gonna talk about decks. Are you guys, from a planning, development planning perspective, I guess thinking about decks and, Nick, if you want to chime in, where these homes are being placed, how much room for a deck are they going to have? And I'm just asking this because 3 years down the road, we're going to have, 6 home buyers. Hey, I want to put a deck down. I need a variance or I need an exception. And if we can avoid that, not that, but I'm just, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, we've ran into these issues with some recent developments, and it's always a valid point to bring up. I mean, if you look at the illustration that Paul has up, I mean, those home pads are pretty substantial in size. Obviously, the biggest thing is going to be how these lots develop, because there is the minimum 75-foot lakeshore setback, but the city also has its riparian view shed setback that the applicant will need to be cognizant of. So, if they develop in a reasonable manner, obviously, I think everyone will get as fairly close to the water as they would like. I mean, my thought would be, these are custom lots. Someone's going to come in kind of hopefully with everything they want at that time of permit. Obviously, many things are unforeseen, but I think at least on the surface that should not be an issue here. I'll let Paul chime in as well, but that's kind of, I guess, my early assessment.
What's the setback for those pads? Question mark.
Paul, are you showing those at 75?
These are at 75 feet, yeah. And these,
So they're
and those
showing at the
pads,
minimum. And obviously, like I said, depending on how they develop, ideally they develop in a linear pattern, and that would probably be the most effective. But obviously, the market will kind of dictate that on what lot sells first and who's ready to build first. But ideally you go 1 to 6 or 6 to 1. But I think if it develops in more of a haphazard, non-numerical order, they'll just have to deal with the the setback requirements that riparian view shed as see fit. So these pads in some cases may certainly shrink a little bit because of that riparian view.
the only comment I have, Nick, is that these pads are shown at 6,000 to 7,000 square feet. So just pretty reasonable size pad for most any house.
Okay. So you guys have considered the house plus any additions that they may need then? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Paul, this development, it's not set up for one builder. This is where the buyer brings in any builder they want.
Yep. That's how we have it currently, yes.
So is the grading then done for all the lots? Is the grading going to be done all at once for all the lots, and then you sell the lots, or each builder is responsible for their grading?
We're going to grade the lots as shown in the plan. So, like anytime somebody builds their home, they're going to need to do some additional grading, but the pads are going to be created for the homes. They're not going to be creating their own pad. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I've just seen in the past where a builder or a developer gets everything approved, and then each builder comes in and they're doing their own grading. I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case, because then I was going to ask how you're going to do, the architect, with the Indian burial person that you said you were going to have. So
Yep.
yeah, that makes sense now. I'm good.
The archaeologist.
Hey, Paul, this is Steve. I had a quick question on the drainage ponds. Is there going to be some
Mhm.
sort of agreement in the land purchase for maintenance on those, or who's going to be responsible for that?
So in the staff report, the city is asking us to create a HOA to provide for the maintenance of those. And so if that's what ends up being the recommendation, that's what we'll end up doing.
That's pretty standard practice, that the stormwater ponding, there's at a very minimum, a taxing district and a maintenance agreement that would kind of establish the care and future maintenance of those ponds. Obviously, we'll work with the city attorney to whether or not a full-blown HOA is required, or if there's some alternative method. But it would be as past practice to look for the developer to set something up.
Nick, this is John.
Great,
I
thanks,
had a
Nick.
question. I want to make sure I understood what I thought you said earlier, Nick. You mentioned regarding the trees plan that the staff is comfortable with it, but I thought you said that if I guess trees were to die or if it didn't work out, that Paul's group would have to replace it or pay a fee. And if that is correct, what I heard, if they had to pay a fee, does that mean then the city would be responsible to replace the trees?
Well, that's correct. I mean, any tree, tree fee, I guess, that's paid, the cash in lieu when they cannot physically plant the trees on the site, that goes into the city's tree fund. And I think in the staff report, I may have even got as far to say some of the measures that money can be used for. So yeah, in the staff report, I mean, essentially what I was outlining there is, based on what they've submitted and what they're saying they're going to do, they'll be complying with the ordinance. Obviously, if there's things that go on out of our control, we'll have to utilize other provisions of the ordinance. But the amount included in the staff report was in the event that the planning commission deemed it not appropriate to give double credit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I think, Damien, we can move to the public hearing.
I got one more question. As I heard the drainage plan, there'd be a runoff onto the other side of Enchanted Lake, as I recall. There really wasn't any discussion, and I know that that's all wetland, but would that additional runoff potentially affect any other neighbors? I'm just asking.
I don't know, Paul, if you want to answer that question, or Joel, maybe.
This might be a good one for Joel.
The drainage is pretty much self-contained on our site. The little bit that'll go on to Bruce Olson's property it'll probably wind its way around and get back into our filtration basin there anyway. So I don't believe we're going to be creating any flooding issues on any adjacent properties. If it were, it would be Bruce's, because that north corner is the most tenuous for getting it to work right.
Got it. I mean, across the street, when we're on that north corner, is that Bruce? That's not necessarily Bruce's.
No, that's part of Lake Minnetonka and the island
So
where
it's
there's a
wetland.
channel there. So it'll be going directly into the lake.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, just hydrologically, the water draining to the front and the back are both going to Lake Minnetonka, the same. So
Yeah, let's, any other questions from staff?
I'm sorry, excuse me, Paul, can you just, and excuse my ignorance on this, but you said, I just heard you say drainage back to Minnetonka, but then earlier you said it was going to drain to the ponds. So can you clarify, at least for me, so I have a better understanding of what will drain to the ponds, what will drain to Lake Minnetonka?
Well, initially, most of the drainage drains to the ponds, but at some point, if there's an event where the ponds fill or
Okay.
the ponds will start to drain out, and those, once they start to drain out, then they will drain into Lake Minnetonka, just like the property does today. I mean, if it rains on the property today, a lot of the water sheds off the land and into the lake.
Okay, all right, understood, all right.
Okay, well, let's open up the public hearing.
All right. I'm going to go down the list here, and if you would like to speak, you'll be given a few minutes to do so. So I'm going to start. There's an Anthony Waldera here. Did you have any comments or would like to speak on this matter?
Okay. Anthony, can you?
Hearing nothing. There's a Brian Benson. Did you wish to speak on this matter at all?
I like the plan as shown versus the prior plan with the cul-de-sac. That's my only comment.
Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you.
Sorry, Brian Benson, 201 East Lake Street, Wayzata 55391.
Thank you. Is that all you had?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Bruce Olson. Bruce, did you wish to comment on this at this time?
Is he able to get off mute or is he in?
Let's see, he left, so we'll come back to him. Next, I believe possible Pam Anderson. Would you like to speak on this item?
Hi, this is Pam's husband, Steve Anderson.
And address, please, Steve.
Yeah, 4100 Enchanted Lane. And from what I see, you have the best possible way to develop that property. They've been very willing to work with me and some of the issues I have. So, I'm all in favor of what we got going.
All right.
All.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
I think that's everyone that is not either planning commissioner, council member, staff, or applicant for another item. So I guess I'll open it up. If there's anyone else here that didn't have a chance to speak yet that would wish to speak, please do so. Again, give your name and your address for the record.
Okay. I did see Bruce Olson on the call earlier.
He was here and then he left. I don't know how long we need or should wait for him. I guess I'll let the planning commission decide that one. But otherwise, I think everyone that wished to spoke had the opportunity to do so.
Okay. Would it be appropriate for me to ask Paul to just summarize kind of what they've got working again? I know he kind of touched on it briefly, or throughout the presentation he touched on it.
That's fine. I think we should, if no one else is ready to speak, we could probably close that public hearing.
Okay.
And then I think, yes, certainly Paul can give a summary if you'd like.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing on this.
Bruce is back.
Bruce is back. Now, would it be
Bruce,
appropriate
did
for
you
me
wish
to open
to
the public?
speak?
Yeah.
Bruce, can you hear us?
It looks like he's having trouble with his mute.
Hello?
Okay, there we go.
Hello? This is Bruce.
Hi, Bruce. We can hear you.
Hey,
Okay.
Bruce, can we get
Name and address, and feel free to have your comments.
Let me go ahead and open the public hearing again. Okay, and then Bruce, can you give us your name, address?
Bruce Olson, 3980 Enchanted Lane.
Okay. And what would you like to comment on this proposed subdivision or plan?
We'd rather have it remain a park, but that's not going to happen. But I think their concept here is going to work. The drainage is always an issue, and hopefully their engineering team can come up with a good drainage plan.
And as I understand it, they're supposed to level out that wall on the south side, or they're doing something with the wall on the south side, and I'll work with you to improve that draining on the back half of your property. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And any other comments? Any other concerns?
Yeah, just as long as those 6 home sites adhere to the 75-foot setback, I think we'll be okay.
Got it. Got it. All right, Bruce, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else, Nick?
I think that was it. We got Bruce's comment, so I think we'll be good to go on the public hearing portion of this meeting here for this item.
All right, let's go ahead and close the public hearing then. Okay, commissioners. Well, I'll start out. The due diligence that Paul's team has done, I think is commendable. I think it's one of the best. From our last meeting that we had, and you did the initial presentation, you guys have really gone above and beyond in meeting with the neighbors and taking consideration, their ask, and done a lot of due diligence in regards to Indian burial and stuff like that. And I think that's really commendable. So personally, I would prefer the 6 over the 8. And I mean, as the neighbors said, I mean, obviously keeping it a park would have been the ideal thing for most people. But this is, it looks like a pretty decent option for development with 6 homes. John, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, if we're going down planning commission, I think my concern from the last time was, potential encroachment. I love the new design. I think Paul and the team did a great job. I think the only concern being, the floodplain, that was the next concern. And from what I'm seeing here, I think it will take care of that. And they've never reached the levels that this will handle. So I'm comfortable with it. I love the design of it. And it also, I'm happy to hear, at least I heard 3 of the 4 people from the neighbors seem to be very comfortable with it. So I think they did a great job.
Damien, it's Mike Kirkwood. I want to just confirm what others have said. I think, Paul, your team has done a fabulous job. The detail in the packet was very comprehensive, to the point where I have no questions. I thought it was very well designed. Thank you.
And Steve, do you have any comments?
I think you guys all said it pretty well. My only question was on lot 6 there. Is there any concern about the Anderson house there being much closer to the lake? Is there any concern there, Nick, with the riparian view, or how? I'm not sure how that works at a point like that.
Yeah, the riparian view has two, I guess, tests or two standards you follow. One is, you connect the dots, and the other is you take an average. So typically on properties, when they come to a point or to a peninsula, the average is what ends up being utilized for that, exercising that provision, I guess, because the straight line tends to fail quite often. But I mean, obviously, these lots won't be able to get any closer than 75. That's the absolute minimum. The riparian view may require them to be further back. Again, it's going to depend on how these lots develop and in what order.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only concern I had. And then you talked about an HOA, but is that actually requirement number 8, where you're talking about a taxing district? Is that where that's covered by the pond?
That might be able to be done in lieu. I guess we'll have to confirm that with the city attorney, what's most appropriate. But yeah, I mean, either the taxing district or an HOA, whatever, will sufficiently, cover that criteria for the maintenance of that stormwater pond.
Perfect. Now I concur with the rest of the commissioners. They've done a fantastic job. They did exactly what we asked them to do, and I have no issues with this plan.
Would one of you commissioners like to make a motion?
I'd like to speak.
Oh, Gary, go ahead, Gary. Sorry.
Yep, we can hear you, Gary.
That's fine. I mean, I concur with everything that everyone else has said about the plan. I just have two little minor issues, I guess, but they're issues to me. And one, it has to do with the decks that you spoke about, Damien. And if they have an HOA, I guess there's usually some bylaws to that in the HOAs and restrictions of how pads can be used. And I'd really like to not see houses come back and have to ask for a variance. So I would hope the builder could put something in their package that's offered to the homeowners or into the HOA that really stipulates that if decks or things going forward are going to have to be within the existing pad of that particular lot. And then the other one is, I don't understand why we're giving credit for trees. These lots will certainly support the cost of paying for the trees that should come to the city, and not the city donating and paying back to the developer. I don't understand why we're doing that. I have a problem with that.
Well, I mean, it is again, it was a discussion point for the planning commission. It is part of the ordinance that says, if the commission as a whole and ultimately the city council feels that the applicant is going above and beyond your standard development practices to preserve large trees, they can be given double credit. Certainly the commission doesn't have to take that stance. But that's something that you as a body can discuss and decide and determine how to include that in your motion.
Well, Nick,
that's all I have.
Nick, this is John. To continue that discussion of what Gary brought up, I guess all I'd ask, being my first development that I've been part of as far as this commission, is that the norm? Is giving the credits the norm? So other developments, you guys did Woodland Cove, obviously, other things. Is this something we would do typically?
To be fair, I've been with Minnetrista for 7 years. I wasn't part of the Woodland Cove planning phase, so I'm not 100% sure. Maybe Paul can speak to that matter. but I don't know if we have utilized this in other areas. I think either A, the sites didn't warrant, didn't have mature enough growth to warrant the consideration. The developer themselves didn't consider that provision of the ordinance. They either A, were able to plant and wasn't of a concern, or maybe they paid the fee and in lieu of the time and effort spent to comply with the ordinance. I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, I guess for what I can say in my experience, I think this would be the first one, but that's not to say that the previous ones, either A, maybe they just didn't warrant it and it wasn't an option, or B, I mean, the developer themselves didn't pursue it. I mean, obviously it's something, the city's not necessarily themselves going to actively seek it, but if the developer wants to propose it and it makes sense in what they're doing, is above and beyond, then it's certainly reasonable to consider it.
And obviously it gets brought up, and Gary brings up a good point. And my point to Gary's was that if it's the norm, if it's something that's typical, then we move forward, in my opinion. If it's not, then we justify why we're going to do it, but also understand that the next time a project gets brought to us, that is something that may get brought up. Anytime you potentially set a precedent, then we're prepared that it will need to happen again potentially, or could happen again potentially. Not that I'm against it if it makes sense, but it's just easier depending on what side of the fence we're on with that. Do you all understand what I'm saying?
The question I have for you, Nick, is when is that tree credit issued? Is that issued like after the grading is done and the building is done, when they actually get a certificate of occupancy, or is that issued based on the proposed development plan?
I mean, it would be done with the development plan. I mean, obviously there's language in the ordinance that talks about, in general, unforeseen circumstances that may result through the, general development of the property. I mean, obviously, Mother Nature is going to do her thing. I mean, there's many things at play that are going to happen that oftentimes are out of the control or not, the intent of the applicant. But I mean, the credit is given at the time of the plat approval, and the tree preservation ordinance remains in effect for each lot until a certificate of occupancy is issued for said lot. Once that happens, the city's control over the trees ceases, and they would then become private property and the discretion of the then landowner.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Gary. I'm not sure exactly if it's truly warranted. What is the, do we know what the dollar amount is on that?
Based on my calculations, like I said, they're 321 and a half inches deficient on their replacement. So that would be either another 321 and a half inches of plantings, or at $100 per inch, that's $32,150 that they would then contribute to the city's tree preservation and environmental enhancement fund.
Okay.
About $5,500 per lot.
This is Steve. I think they've done some significant savings of these trees, especially in that upper northeast corner, those oak trees. At least when they presented it, they talked about changing some of their plans and changing some of the grading and definitely rerouting driveways on lots 2 and 3 as well. I don't know, Nick. I was on board with it, but if we haven't done it in the past, and again, these type of lots, I don't know they could throw another 300 inches of trees in here, right? But they're pretty well stacked up with trees already or
Right.
ponds.
The issue isn't, to me, that they are not or don't have room to plant it. It's that they're going their plan dictates that they should pay for the removal of the trees or non-planting of the trees. You know, an option would be to go to 5 lots, probably.
Well,
So in
but
lieu
I
of
mean,
in lieu of having less room to plant trees, they have one more lot that they've added. And at $3,200, I'd say that's a pretty good exchange. An extra lot for $3,200.
right, but if we have a
and
if we have an ordinance,
in my years, both in the Park Commission and the Planning Commission, I can maybe only think of one that I can think of where we suggested that be done. Now, I can't tell you what the city council approved, because we don't always see everything that comes back, or do we necessarily always look at everything that's on it when it comes back. There are some minor changes that may have been made at the city council level.
The only thing I would add to that is I definitely see what you're saying, Gary. What I wouldn't want to see happen is for them to say, hey, we're just going to go ahead and get rid of these mature, beautiful trees, you know, that are well established, so we can plant 3 new trees in place. And I just want to make sure we're not trying to incentivize them to do that.
I can understand that.
yeah, I don't think we are, Damien, right? Because the more trees they take out, the bigger their deficit, right? And the harder it's going to be for them to dig out of that. So
Exactly.
So Nick, what is the spirit of the double credit? Can you maybe give us some background on that, or is that something you don't?
Well, I think the idea is just, you know, you've got larger trees, you've got, you know, more established growth, you know, that is, you know, considered desirable to keep. And obviously when you can go above and beyond, you know, typical development and plat and design standards to accommodate that matured growth, I mean, you know, based on the information the applicants submitted, I mean, they have done that in several ways, you know, made changes to their plan, moved driveways around, you know, alter their grading plan, things like that, to attempt to save this larger growth. You know, I mean, obviously, also, you know, proposing 6 instead of 8. You know, an 8 lot comes in, and you know, basically, if you can see the screen, there's that large stand of trees that all come down because there's a road in the way. So, I mean, there's another thing to consider too, I suppose. I mean, I don't know what a tipping point is for what the applicant has proposed, but I mean, you know, there is the possibility, I mean, an 8 lot plat could come through at some point, you know, based on the decisions of the planning commission and ultimately city council, in which case a lot of that tree growth goes down, and they might just elect to pay the fee because now they've got 2 extra lots they're making money on. I don't know. I mean, maybe Paul can chime in on that, but I mean, the idea being that, hey, you know, they're going above and beyond what's normally done in a plat standard to help protect the largest of the growth on the site. And I mean, it's really at the discretion of the planning commission and city council. If you feel that that intent is not being met, then you certainly can say, you know, we're not warranting the double credit, and, you know, send them back to the drawing board. But, you know, that's kind of the purpose of it, is to, you know, go above and beyond, protect that larger growth to the fullest extent possible.
So what you're saying is they're trying to get, so instead of paying us the money, they're trying to spend that money by enhancing their design to preserve the trees. And so at the end of it, it's probably a net for them in some ways, because they're doing things they wouldn't normally do just to make sure that they can preserve the large growth trees.
Right. I mean, that's the intent, and I guess that's where it's the planning commission's decision to decide if that is being done here. You know, are they going above and beyond? Have they made, you know, necessary accommodations to these large trees to warrant the special considerations that come along with it? I mean, that's what you as the body have to juggle and decide. You know, have they done enough to say that, hey, you know, it's good that they're protecting this growth and they're going above and beyond it in these manners. It makes sense to us.
Paul, can
From
you
what
go
I've
back to the
seen,
slide
I
where you're
like,
talking about the trees in pink and the ones you're saving, the ones you're, it was like a couple of slides back.
I think if we think about it, we all can agree that a lot with mature trees is probably easier to sell and probably would garner more value to someone who's buying it and would grant a higher price for the lot than a lot with no trees or all little skinny trees.
In this day and age, we'll take any lot
I
nowadays,
don't,
tell you the truth.
I don't know. Maybe my question is really with the city plan and the plan saying that, wow, we're going to pay you to save big trees. Well, I'm going to save the big trees if I'm a builder anyway, because yes, it may cost me a little more money, but it's going to make the property more attractive to sell, whether it sells quicker or whether it sells for a higher value or for both.
Nick, are we asking that, we're not, in the credit is saying they don't have to plant as many trees versus them paying a fee, correct? So we're not paying them money.
No, we're not paying them anything. No, I guess by allowing the double credit, you're
reducing the amount
alleviating
of
them from paying us. You know, they would have to pay us otherwise, or plant 321 and a half more inches. So by giving them the credit, I mean, we're not paying them anything. I mean, if you want to look at it that we're losing $32,000, I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but I mean, we're not giving them any money for this by any means. We're just, I guess, giving them a credit and thus not requiring an additional fee.
this is what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is, to the point of 321 and a half inches, is I'm seeing a design here that I think they worked around what we were asking. We're saving older trees. And I would rather have the older trees. The small tree is going to take 10 years to grow, and at least from what I'm seeing, the spirit of, I think, what we're trying to accomplish is met here. And I don't think it's as simple as, well, sure, they want more larger trees because they can sell the land for more. Sure, that could be the case, and it probably is. But the larger trees are better for the community, and not just that, but they moved the design around from what I've seen before to accomplish this. So I think there's more to it than just saying, just 321 and a half inches, because they could put 4 more trees, and I think someone stated this, Damien, maybe, and then put 4 more trees for one big tree, and we don't want that either. So I think that's the other part of the argument, is that I really like this design, and I think it'll be good for the community, and I don't have an issue with the credit. The only concern I had, Nick, was I kind of wish we would have done this before, because we could have said had a precedent already. But my comfort level is this is a good design, and that I think this the credit is warranted.
Gary, I mean, I'll comment on it. I understand where you're coming from, but I do think in regards to setting a precedence of what we expect a developer to come in here and do to show that they have met that due diligence of saving trees. I mean, personally, I'd have to agree with John. I think that they have displayed intent to meet that credit, and that's just my opinion. And I want to see these mature trees stick around, and I just don't want to. I don't want them, again, knocking down new old trees, or doing. I like the way it is personally. So. And Gary, just to comment on your deck, I like what you were saying about the deck, and then I hope they don't come back because the pad size are big enough to, to have a house in the deck. So I don't know that the builder is going to put anything in place. I don't know that we can ask them to do that, but I do feel that Paul's answer, that the lot and the pad size should encompass a deck and a house. I think it's reasonable, and I think I think for us as a body to make a note that we shouldn't expect that that, and we should make a mental note that if we see a request come in the future, I mean, we've got all the reasons in the world to deny it.
That's fine. I agree with you. It's not I believe the pads are large enough, but houses are getting bigger and bigger, especially those on the lake. And we'll just see what happens.
Okay, any other questions and comments from the commissioners? John, Steve, Mike, Gary, anybody want to put forth a motion?
Language for a motion? Nick?
What's that?
Damien, did we want to add in the deck thing into the requirements or conditions?
Nick,
Sorry.
I don't know that we can do that. Nick, can you talk about that? I mean,
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know how you could possibly put that as a condition at this stage in the game.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, the applicant's on record here, and knowing, hearing what we've said this evening, hopefully when they go to market it, they'll, help convey that message. I mean, obviously, as staff, we'll do the best we can when these permits come in to ensure that, I mean, obviously, number one, that setbacks are being complied with, but, do what we can to go maybe above and beyond to just, call out areas where it might be close or where it might get dicey. I mean, I think, given all the circumstances, I mean, obviously, should we end up down that path, I mean, they'll have to satisfy the variance criteria, and I guess at that time, the planning commission, the city council will be able to discuss and determine if that warrants it or not. But I mean, I don't know that we can add that as a condition of approval. I mean, I just don't know how we would phrase that.
Okay, that makes sense. All right.
And we'll do what we can. I mean, we'll every step of the way that we can, we will. Hopefully the applicant will do the same when they go to market it. And I guess we'll just have to, trust the enforcement of the ordinances and the setback requirements. And, should a design flaw come forward, I mean, we'll have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis, just like any other variance situation.
Thanks, Nick. All right, I motion to recommend the city council approve the requested preliminary plat with variances to develop 6 single-family units at the property of 4,000 Enchanted Lane, subject to conditions 1 through 12.
I'll second that.
okay. Chris, are you still there? Would you like me to call roll call?
No, I can do that. I just want to confirm that it was motioned by Livermore and seconded by Kirkwood.
Correct.
Okay. Then we have Acting Chair Damian Young,
Aye.
Gary Pettis,
Aye.
John Sturgis,
Aye.
Mike Kirkwood,
Aye.
Steve Livermore.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes.
All right, and
5-0.
Paul and applicants, this motion will be forwarded to the city council at their June 7th planning commission or city council meeting for final action. So June 7th is the tentative date with the city council.
Awesome. Well,
Did I stop sharing the screen, Nick? Sorry, I just went
Yep,
for
you're
a leave
good.
here. Okay,
You're good.
thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yep.
That was very nice.
yeah, commissioners, I really hope
Thank
that
you.
this is a standard that we set from a developer standpoint in regards to, putting forth the effort to accommodate neighbors and as well as our comments. So, Nick, next. What do we got next?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. The next item on the agenda is also a public hearing. This request is a comprehensive plan amendment and a rezone request. It's an application from Joe Fake on behalf of the property owner, the estate of Bobby Lou Lindstrom, for a comp plan amendment and a rezone for the property generally located at the southeast corner of County Road 92 and West Highland Road. The present zoning and future land use designation is 40 acres. So it's the permanent ag, future land use, and the agricultural preserve zoning district. So the applicant this evening has a purchase agreement on the property. It's a vacant land, about 38 acres in size. And the applicant has expressed that they will be pursuing a subdivision of the property. I think even in your staff report, there's a concept they're considering for 3 lots at roughly, I think it's 12, 13 acres each. So the Planning Commission this evening should take a look at the request against the city's comprehensive plan, the goals and policies set forth in the 2040 plan, and also, as it pertains to utilities, expected growth in the unsewered area, things of that nature, and also then the zoning standards of not only the lot that exists today, but the lots they may be creating. And there is a special provision in city code for properties within the Ag Preserve zoning district that are located east of County Road 92 to be given this special consideration for the Planning Commission City Council to make this change from the 40 acre zoning to the 10 acre zoning. So, looking at kind of the public process for this request, we did send notices to property owners within 500 feet. We did not receive any written comments as a result of that notice. Maybe there are someone still on this call this evening that would wish to speak, and they'll be able to do so during the public hearing. So with that being said, the next steps in the process would be for the Planning Commission to consider the staff report and then open up a public hearing. Invite anyone here this evening who would like to speak on the item, the opportunity to do so. Once everyone's been heard, then you would close the public hearing, have discussion amongst yourselves, then look for the entertainment of a motion. And based on the information submitted by the applicant, the recommended action would be a motion to recommend approval, recommend the City Council adopt a resolution of approval for the comprehensive plan amendment and an ordinance for the rezoning of the property with PID 2011724230001. It's located at the southeast corner of West Highland Road and County Road 92. Based on the findings in the staff report and subject to the 2 conditions and any that the Planning Commission would like to add. So I'm certainly here if the Planning Commission has any questions of myself. I am unsure if we have our applicant here this evening. I did my best to send them the materials but was unable to connect with them. So I'm not sure if they're here this evening. But then obviously open up the public hearing, close the public hearing, and then entertain a motion.
Let's go ahead and open up the public hearing.
All right. So I'll run down the people that are still on this call. There's someone with the name Ambrose. Did you care to speak on this item? Not seeing anything. And then there has been someone unidentified through the web connecting in. Did you care to speak on this item?
No, thank you.
And then I guess, is there anyone else here that would like to speak on the item? I think I ran down a couple of the parties that, that wasn't an applicant for the other item. And like I said, I guess we don't have our applicant here this evening. So, is there anyone else that would like to speak? All right, I don't think we have anyone. So Damien, if you want to take it away and close her down if you'd like. You're on mute.
Let's go ahead and close the public hearing, open up for discussion. Just want to confirm
questions.
Yeah, I just want to confirm, Nick, when we sent out the notice, we didn't get any response?
I got
phone
none,
calls,
nope.
nothing? Emails? Okay.
Nothing that no written emails or letters, and no phone calls that I would attribute directly to this item that I'm aware of.
Okay.
How many? Hey, Nick, given the scarcity of people out there, how many people, is that like 3 or 4 people?
You'd actually be surprised. I don't have the list off the top of my head, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was give or take a dozen.
Okay.
I don't have that in front of me. I apologize, but yeah, I want to say it's give or take a dozen properties.
This is Mike. Speaking from a relatively newbie position here, in subdividing this land that looks pretty straightforward, very little threat or issues, what historically are the kinds of issues that can pop up in dividing a piece of land like this that would be problems for us down the road?
I mean, based on what we've seen from the applicant, I mean, obviously there's some wetland considerations here. However, I think there's fairly substantial areas to develop for home sites. With their plat application, they'll have to include a home site, considerations, I believe, for an accessory building, and then a primary and an alternate septic site. Based on the square footages that the ordinance requires, I think that total area amounts to somewhere between a half an acre and an acre maybe. So when you consider, creating 12, 13 acre parcels, I mean, the hope would be that there's fairly substantial building sites here. I mean, obviously there's the existing infrastructure with Highland Road West to service this proposed, hypothetical proposed 3-lot split. They're not adding any infrastructure. So, I mean, obviously that could be further vetted out at the preliminary plat stage, which again will come back to the Planning Commission, which will again be a public hearing and another opportunity to further discuss in greater detail. But I mean, on the surface, the current owner went through and removed, this was in the Ag Preserve Tax Program. They went ahead and removed it from that program and kind of took step 1, and now the potential buyer is taking step 2, which is to change the city's planning documents to allow for the opportunity to split. And then they'll have to continue that the next step further in the preliminary plat stage, which, like I said, we'll have that public hearing, which will have the review by the planning commission and another chance to take a look at it. So, I mean, obviously we'll have more detail at that point, so we'll be able to look at any other considerations. But, you know, once we get to that point, you know, I think we'll be able to address it. I mean, I would think there's enough of a, you know, there's enough size of these lots where they would have some flexibility to maybe make changes. I mean, they could do a 10-10 and a 18 if they so chose. I mean, they're choosing, I think, to pretty evenly divide it into 3, but maybe when they get into the stages, they'll fine tune it a little bit.
I think it, you know, it being close to St. Bonnie, we're not going to see, you know, 3 homes are not going to drastically change the traffic patterns over there. And I mean, I just don't see an issue with this personally. I think there's enough room left in the process for us to, you know, be cautious enough and you know, let this move forward.
I would agree with
Yeah,
Damien, Nick. Nick, what are the concerns in doing this? What are the concerns you and staff had when you initially saw it, if any?
To be completely honest, I mean, you know, the initial concern was with the existing landowner, was with that ag preserve program. I mean, that obviously prevents the ability to develop, but they were able to go through the motions to get it out of that program. And once that step was taken, I mean, being that it's located east of County Road 92, you know, there's existing city infrastructure to service the proposed development, or the 3-lot split, whatever you call it, development, or whatever you want to call it. So I think it seems relatively straightforward. I mean, obviously there might be some details worth ironing out at the preliminary plat stage. You know, in terms of wetlands, in terms of building areas, building sites, any necessary grading. You know, I mean, obviously it's likely we'll double check with Hennepin County, but I believe they probably got what they need in terms of a right of way for 92. So I mean, there's some things that'll still go through the process once we get to that formal plat stage. You know, obviously, you know, Highland Road, I suppose we'll have to consider. You know, it's a gravel road now. I mean, it's likely that, you know, it'll stay gravel, but I mean, maybe there's some legal considerations taken, you know, in terms of a petition and waiver, where should the city in the future want to, you know, pave that road, they'll pay their portion in an assessment.
Right.
Much like we do with any other road project. But I mean, I think that level of discussion, I mean, doesn't really need to impact what we're doing this evening. Because I mean, it really isn't until they get to that plat stage where we really see their intent. I mean, included with your staff report was a concept they're considering, and quite likely probably what they'll come back with. You know, maybe with a little more refined, a little more detail. So I mean, we at least, you know, much like the item we just discussed, you know, we have an idea of what they're considering. You know, so we're not going into this request blind with, you know, hey, what are they going to do? You know, I mean, are they going to do, you know, 2 lots, 3 lots, 4 lots with a variance or whatever? I mean, it seems, you know, at least their intent is it's pretty straightforward. You know, 3 lots, you know, large enough, wide enough, deep enough to accommodate an agricultural type of a situation, a rural residential type setting. So, I mean, I think at this point, you know, I kind of rattle off, I suppose, some things that we'll be cognizant of when we get to that preliminary plat stage. But at this point, I mean, this is just step 1. So, I mean, until we get to step 2, I mean, it's going to be a little bit difficult to foresee every possible,
Right.
you know, hiccup or shortfall. But I mean, we'll, you know, you'll get another a chance to review it when they actually have the plat. So at that time, hopefully the applicant will be with us to discuss their request.
That was my next question, Nick, is having this on our deck, and is it typical that we move forward in planning commission if the parties are not present?
I mean, we have done that before. I mean, we have had variances, other circumstances where the applicants, you know, in their mind, they may see it as rudimentary and very straightforward and opt not to attend. I mean, really at the end of the day, I mean, it's their job to advocate for their project. So, I mean, if there are questions that the planning commission has that I as staff can't, satisfactorily answer, I mean, it's well within your, role to delay it a month. However, I mean, maybe you want to take into considerations the facts of the situation, the request of the applicant. I mean, how vital is their attendance in your opinion on this matter? A plat, I would be a little more concerned if they didn't show up. This step, I would to a degree say I am concerned, but it is a pretty straightforward request.
John,
like I said, I mean, we have a history of applications where the applicant is not present, but the planning commission has moved forward. So, I mean, that wouldn't be out of the realm of normalcy, I guess.
Oh, thank you. And my only concern, Nick, is, at least if I heard you correctly, you haven't even talked to, I guess, Mr. Fake or Bobby Lindstrom. And so that the work you all have done and now us looking at it, is this a real deal? That's
Well,
part of it.
I have spoken with Joe, Fake the applicant. I believe, unfortunately, Bobby Lou, I think, is no longer with us, and it's one of her children is kind of operating the estate, but the county still has it in her name. But no, I have spoken with Joe. I did not connect with him since distributing the packet to you all. So it's been a couple days since I haven't been able to connect. But I have talked with him. I've talked with real estate agents and the parties for the trust. I mean, I have talked to them in the past. I mean, this is, all intents and purposes, and what's been made known to me, this is real. It's something they're intent on. I'm not sure why they chose not to attend. I did what I could to get them here, but to a degree,
Nick,
it's a pretty straightforward deal.
I would say that the bigger concern, John, would be if there, a notice went out, and what are the neighbors saying? If we got a comment from someone, it was negative, and we didn't hear from the owners, at that point, we definitely would likely want to delay it so we can hear from the owners or something like that before denying it. But since we haven't gotten any responses to the public notice, and no one showed up for the public hearing, not advocating for it, I think it's just a straightforward, situation. We're not saying go build tomorrow. We're saying, hey, the next step is, you have to present, X. So, I personally, I think this is a viable next process. We just, I think this is not unreasonable for us to make a recommendation.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, Nick and the other planning commission members who have been around for a while longer, I don't have a problem with this particular splitting into three pieces here. I'm confused by the notion of agricultural preserve district, where that fits in the comprehensive plan, which I have not had a chance to really review. But it seems like at a certain level, this is a death by 1,000 cuts of the agricultural area of Minnetrista, and I'm sure you guys have addressed this before. Are there boundaries and limits as to when we would say, no, you can't divide this up anymore, otherwise it's no longer farmland? Or are we saying farmland can be developed as long as the chunks are big enough? I just don't have the history on that.
Yeah, I guess I can give you my experience and my understanding. I think, the line of demarcation, at least with all the planning documents, is County Road 92. So land located west of County Road 92, and then I suppose Highway 7 north of that, I think that's going to stay rural for quite some time, and in those larger tracts, that 40-acre zoning. So, I think that'll hopefully stay farm fields for many years to come. Obviously, looking at the land east of 92, there's still plenty of other properties that are in this 40-acre zoning. And if you look at, the area, there's a 200-acre farm just to the south of this. So, we're doing the best we can to also then maintain that farmland. Obviously allowing, I suppose the minimum 10 acres, that's still a suitable lot. I mean, I'm by no means a farmer. I'm not going to pretend to know the business and the economics of 10 versus 40, but, based on the planning documents, would assume 10 is to a degree viable. That's still rural, that's still large. There's still the ability to farm on that, I would think. So, I think as a whole, things are being preserved. Like I said, the line being 92, east, we can consider it. West, we wouldn't consider it. So I think at this point, that's kind of where the line is drawn. And obviously there's really nothing between a 10-acre zoning on a private well and a septic system versus kind of your traditional residential neighborhood of, maybe 2 to 3 units per acre. So, this thing won't further develop until city utilities have made their way there, which could be decades, to be completely honest. So, I don't know, Mike, if that sufficiently answers your question, but I guess.
I just wanted to set a context, because I know we had a big issue around the solar farm, which was directly north of this property, as being not an appropriate agricultural use. So I was trying to figure out where is the boundary as to what we accept and what we don't accept, and size limits.
I'd like to get Gary to weigh in on this. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I said I'd like to hear Gary weigh in on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I can shed a little light on that. When it was decided to allow lots to be, our parcels divided into 10-acre lots, probably, I'm guessing it's 10, 12 years ago at least, it was to preserve large lots. At that time, the MUSO line was pretty aggressive. And the city, if I remember correctly, wanted to get ahead of that and put a provision out there that allowed us to develop these 30 acres, 40 acres, 80 acres into 10-acre lots and continue to give us the opportunity to keep this area as rural as possible without having to fight the MUSO line. So this is pretty straightforward as to what the city calls for them to move to the next step. And I can see that if it's a trust that's handling this, that maybe somebody wouldn't show up at this time. I'm really not that concerned about that one. And I would agree with Damien that if we had some concerns from neighbors, then I would be concerned. But I think that this is just pretty easy decision to something that should be moved forward, in my opinion.
Hold on here. I believe we have someone from the property owner that may be willing to speak here. Steve, are you there?
It's actually Kristen Nelson. I'm the personal representative for Bobby Lou Lindstrom. And I believe this offer is real and valid, and I hope you will approve it.
Can you give us your, you gave us your full name, but can you give us your address as well?
Sure, 9922 East Dale, D-A-L-E Lane, Scottsdale, Arizona, 85262.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. We closed the public hearing, didn't we? So this was just, this was just, maybe again,
I must have got them confused with the other Steve we had for the Enchanted.
Got it. Do you want to go ahead and does anyone want to make a motion?
I will motion. I'll motion to move forward with the comprehensive plan amendment rezone at County Road 92 and West Highland Road.
Okay. Anyone want to second that? I'll go ahead and second that.
All right, motion by Sturgis and second by Young. Chris, you want to go ahead with the roll call?
Yep, sorry, I had to get myself unmuted. Acting Chair Damian Young,
Aye.
Gary Pettis,
Aye.
John Sturgis,
Aye.
Mike Kirkwood,
Aye.
Steve Livermore.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0. I just have one clarification. I'm sorry, Kristen, I didn't get your last name.
Nelson, Nelson,
Nelson.
and thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I needed. Yep.
Nick, do you want to tell that representative the next steps, please?
Yep, so this item will be forwarded to the City Council for final action on June the 7th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're very welcome.
Awesome. All right, what do we have next?
All right, the last item on the agenda is another public hearing. It is a variance request from Heather Manley for a wetland setback variance at 7480 Valley Creek Drive. The setback is for the construction of a swimming pool. So I'll give a little bit of a background here, talk about the variance criteria, and kind of talk about the nature of the request. And then I'll be available for questions of the Planning Commission. Then we will have the, you can certainly, the applicant is here, you can invite her to speak, and then open the public hearing, give anyone else an opportunity to speak. And then once you close the public hearing, consider all the facts in the record before making a motion on that. So with that being said, I'll start with a little bit of a background here. This property was purchased by the applicant back in 2013 as a vacant lot. They then pursued a wetland delineation to determine the edge and the boundaries of the wetland. And that was done shortly after purchase, also in 2013. And looking at the property, when they were designing the home site and the required primary and alternate septic site, there was an original location in the development plan that called for the septics to be, I guess I'll say, outside of that peninsula area further south along Valley Creek Drive. However, when the designer and the applicant and the builder went through that process, those sites were deemed no longer suitable for this property. So therefore they had to move the septic sites to the, I guess I'll continue to call it the peninsula area where the home site is located. So that also put a wrinkle in kind of the buildable area of the site, and it caused a administrative amendment for them to shift the location of the home to, because it was needed to be closer to the street than the setback allowed. So, there's that kind of unique history for this property as well, and that kind of leads into the request now is a swimming pool this evening. And the way the city ordinance has been applied, swimming pools must meet the accessory structure and uses setback and the boundary or setbacks and the boundaries of the wetlands. So the applicant has put forth a plan with the pool located within both the wetland setback and actually within the wetland buffer that they hold in favor of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. So the nature of this request for a swimming pool, I think the big point that the Planning Commission is going to have to discuss and weigh is, is a swimming pool something, of a luxury type item worthy of consideration of a variance? Looking at the property, and all the factors, is it justifiable to consider a swimming pool at this location? The best I could do to provide the Planning Commission with some context and some, I guess, past practice or history dates way back to 1986, when there was a request for a swimming pool with it was the lakeshore setback, not the wetland setback. So, kind of to a degree an apple and an orange. But at that time, the city denied the request, citing that, a swimming pool is a luxury item and that, reasonable use of the property was already there. They could have a home site and they could use it as they want. I mean, they just couldn't have an additional swimming pool because of the way the property had developed. But again, I mean, that's the best example I have. Again, it's not really an apples to apples, more of an apples to orange. But take that for what it's worth, Commission. So in your staff report, as customary, I've outlined the standard variance criteria for which you should consider all variances. Again, remember they should be considered on their own, with their own merits and their own unique circumstances and practical difficulties. Not necessarily getting too concerned with the nature of a precedent, but the idea of, like I said, a general policy type discussion of whether or not a luxury item such as a swimming pool, warrants variance consideration. So in the staff report, I kind of went into that in greater detail, and I guess I'll leave it up to the commission should they have questions of me for how that staff report was prepared and how it was outlined. But looking at the neighborhood comments, we did send our notice out to everyone within 500 feet. We ourselves, as a city, did not get any written comments. However, the applicant did reach out to their neighbors and included with their submittals was signatures from 5 represented properties that do not have an objection to the request. So in conclusion, I think the first item of business is for the Planning Commission to determine whether or not a variance for a luxury type item is a reasonable one. And should you conclude that it is, then obviously looking at the standard variance criteria and making sure to check all the boxes. Should this request fail to check even one box, the Planning Commission should look at a denial of that. I mean, remember, it's an all or nothing with the variance request. So that kind of gives my background on the situation and where it's at. So I'll leave it up to the Planning Commission for any questions of staff, and then I think we can invite our applicant to speak and let them, state their case, and then move on to the public hearing. So I'll turn it over to you guys and see if anyone has any questions.
Noise is coming.
Together, I'm going to leave up one moment here while we see if they have any questions of staff. Then I'll let you unmute here.
I have a question for staff, Nick.
Yep.
Do you know if we have any other saltwater pools in the city of Minnetrista?
Not to my knowledge. I guess we don't go to that level of detail at the time of permit. But to my knowledge, I am not aware of any other in the city. That's not to say they don't exist, but they're not to the knowledge of staff.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is I did a little research, not a lot, but a little research into saltwater pools, and I found out that one of the things I found out is that a lot of states and municipalities now are making owners of saltwater pools, they no longer allow them to drain their water onto the property because of an environmental hazard that it can cause, of a chemical that it creates that is can be harmful to older humans, young kids, pets, and the environment. They're making them tank their water out. Anytime they drain their pool for a winter or they drain it to clean it, that water has to be hauled out by somebody, and they're not allowing them to pump it into any of or a lot of the city's sewer systems. I know there's not a sewer system here, but there is a very fragile ecosystem here with the 6 Mile Creek.
Gary and Nick, I am absolutely not an expert on chlorine pools compared to saltwater pools, but I have talked to developers from the hotel side when I was at Carlson Companies. The reason I bring that up is one of the arguments that they have made in the past, and Gary, I honestly haven't read up on this, but one of the things they have said is that chlorine pools could be more toxic than saltwater pools. That's probably something for more research if it is an issue. I do not want to discount what Gary researched because I haven't, but I have heard that from a couple of people. So comparing letting the water out from a pool that has chlorine and other cleaning things compared to a saltwater pool, I don't know if for today's purposes, but it is something that maybe more research should be done if it does come into consideration. Meaning, what?
Let me answer that, because all the sites that I looked at debunked the theory that saltwater pools do not use chlorine. They all use chlorine along with saltwater.
Okay.
It's not as heavy. It's not as heavily chlorinated, but it is chlorine water. There is chlorine used in saltwater pools.
And Gary, I don't know if Miss Manley is prepared to speak to that or not, but maybe she has something to say to that. Because as I said, I'm just going by what I've heard from other developers through my career.
No, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Nick, do you have any other, was there a reason for the pool, being, the pandemic, less people not really, having the desire to go to a public pool in the next couple of years, per se? Is it a lifestyle need? Was there any other, reason for the pool? And when I mean
maybe the
lifestyle,
applicant
medical
can
or
speak to
just,
that.
Okay.
I mean that was some of the justification they provided. I'll let the planning commission determine whether or not that's a viable solution. I mean, the pandemic wasn't unique to them. I mean, we're all dealing with it. It's not fun times for anyone. So, I guess the planning commission can ultimately make that decision if that should or shouldn't weigh in on your decision. But, I believe I did unmute Heather if you guys want to ask her any questions. I think she might be on mute herself this time, but I did unmute her.
And Nick, before Heather speaks, I just wanted to say one thing. Our focus today, though, is the setback, correct? That's our focus.
I mean, ultimately, yes. I mean, looking at the nature of the request, I mean, I've been with Minnetrista 7 years. Nothing like this has came through. I mean, you could see the history that I had to go back to 86 to find a comparable, situation. So, I mean, to me, that might be your first step, is to kind of wrestle with that concept of, I mean, something that's more of a luxury than a necessity. I mean, is that something we should be considering for variances or not? And then obviously, yes, looking at the setback variance request, the criteria established by state law and city ordinance as to what we review and consider variances for, that would be the next step. But I think, I mean, it might be worthwhile to have an internal discussion of, is this something in general that the city is willing to consider?
I'd be curious to know what discussions were had around the term luxury by the city council back in '86, which you can't answer, obviously. But.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I mean, obviously, we do have the resolution of that, and in lieu of confusing the staff report here, I opted to not include that resolution. But yeah, I mean, it was. I'm going to be paraphrasing, but I mean, what it seemed to me they determined was that, you've got a property, you've got a house, you've got reasonable use of your lot. You're not being denied reasonable use by the setback standards. You just, your lot happened to develop in a way that doesn't afford the opportunity for a swimming pool. There are many lots in Minnetrista in which new homes have been built in, we'll say tear down, rebuild situations, or in the case of like a Woodland Cove, where they'll be specifically designing their lot to accommodate a pool. So they might push their house further away from the road or from the lake rather, sorry, so they can get a pool in there. Now, you guys can wrestle and determine whether or not that's fair in all situations where they could have been at 75 and then they could ask for a variance from the 75 to put the pool 50 feet from the water's edge or whatever it was. So I mean,
in which case we would make the decision based on setback, not luxury.
well, I mean, it would be denied at the building permit stage because of setbacks, but I mean, if they wanted it, we'd be in the same situation, and you'd be looking at the setback requirement and the justifying the variance criteria for a swimming pool, where we're kind of at that same argument of, it's a luxury. I mean, you had the opportunity to make the decision, you elected not to, and now you're kind of coming back again. So, I mean, obviously, at the same rate, there are unique circumstances with this lot. I mean, it's not often you're going to be surrounded by wetland on 3 sides and then a street side on the other. So, I mean, there are unique situations and unique circumstances with this lot that may in and of itself warrant the idea and the consideration for it, where it's, again, not a straight apples to apples comparison with a lakeshore property. But, it goes to the mold of, I mean, I guess, and that's the decision the planning commission has to grapple with. I mean, is at the end of the day, is every lot worthy of consideration for a swimming pool? I mean, everyone's going to face their own set of unique circumstances, whether they're a tiny residential lot, lakeshore lot built at the lakeshore setback, or a peninsula lot surrounded by wetlands on 3 sides. I mean, everything's going to pop up, and I mean, you're going to have to decide. I mean, is this something that you're willing to consider in certain circumstances and maybe not in others? Because I mean, I know we always talk about the term precedent, but really when it comes to variances, I mean, the term precedent should not exist, because every variance should be considered on its own merits. I mean, you should be able to find something unique about a piece of property as to why you would approve or deny a variance in all circumstances. So I mean, the idea being, I mean, is this something overall that's worth considering? I mean, I guess it kind of goes to the reasonable use of the property, and does it exist with or without the variance? And that's something for the planning commission to decide and to consider, and ultimately forward to the city council.
Hi, everyone. This is Heather. Nice to meet you. I'm available for Q&A. The property is this the right time, Nick?
Yeah, go ahead. I think unless anyone.
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. So the property is crazy unique. It's basically an island with a road that brings you to the house. When we had the wetland delineation upon building, it was in the 2014, which I heard in your earlier conversations was that record high. So it is a very high wetland delineation survey. We had to move, as you mentioned, Nick, our garage around and move the house forward because of how odd and tight the property is, and because of our septic and our need and requirement to have a backup septic. There's really no other spot for us to put a pool. So when we were looking at the property and engaging the watershed, we have had really good conversations. Nick, I think we had really good conversations, and I had really good conversations with Cole at the watershed of what was acceptable. And when we were looking, we were really looking at being 25 feet from the wetland buffer, or being 25 feet out from that delineation. And he actually had shared with us that we can go up to 12.5. So they are in favor of this. But should we go below 25 feet up to 12.5 feet, we would have to make up that buffer somewhere else on the property, which I actually am quite confident that we can stay at that 25-foot line and really take our plans into a different direction, make the pool smaller. I have Nick from Performance Pools on the phone to talk all about salt water and impact and how we handle that and what's really in Minnetrista and what's not from their experience as installers. But I feel like we can actually bring that profile of what we were even looking to about probably half the size of what we were proposing. That allows us to stay at 25 feet plus of that wetland buffer, which then required 0 variance request from the Minnehaha watershed. That helps you guys give you a little, just a little background.
So Nick, as I understand it, she'd have to get a variance from the city and one from Minnehaha Creek, right?
As proposed and included with your packet, that is correct. Yes. So Minnehaha Creek has an average buffer requirement of 25 feet. And what Heather was getting at is, I mean, they would be willing to consider a reduction in that. I mean, they'd have to file an amended declaration. They would be willing to go up to 12.5 feet in terms of disturbance and improvements within the wetland buffering. It would require the applicant to add additional buffering elsewhere to have that average maintain the 25 feet that they've got in their rules. So if the Planning Commission ultimately goes down the path of recommending approval, that absolutely would be a condition, is that they would have to, in the event they need to, they would have to, satisfy the watershed district, obtain an amended declaration, and provide that to the city in advance of a permit. Now, it sounds like, I mean, there still appears to be some back and forth of pool location and setback discussion. And so that's something the Planning Commission can consider as well. But I mean, that wouldn't change the nature of your request. I mean, if you look at that site plan, I mean, there's no way she's complying with the setback requirement with a swimming pool on this lot. I mean, in any way. I mean, I will make a couple of points based on, the comments Heather made. She did say that the wetland was done at the, when water levels were high. At that, to that effect, I mean, staff would say, I mean, if the wetland has receded, I mean, you could certainly, hire a delineator and have it redelineated. I mean, the report by normal circumstances is pretty old. I've been told in the past that, every 3 to 5 years, I mean, really those should be updated. I mean, because wetlands are natural resources. They're living and breathing just like us. I mean, they change and they ebb and flow as climate, as weather and water and all that stuff change. So, I mean, that is something they could consider is, I mean, has the water level in the wetland receded significantly? I mean, maybe there is no need for a setback variance. I mean, that staff doesn't feel that completely has been, I guess, vetted out or explored.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, they have, I'm by no means a septic expert, but I mean, they have shown locations for the primary and alternate site. And there was a letter in the staff report explaining that, why those sites were chosen. But I guess I don't feel that there was significant, enough reasoning as to why. It just says those are the only 2 sites. I mean, I guess I'd like to understand a little bit more as to why they're the only sites. I'm a novice in the septic system rules. I mean, Hennepin County is our permitting authority. I mean, they are required to have a primary and alternate site based on my conversations with the county. So, I mean, there's a couple things that, I feel, maybe a little more work could have been done. I mean, the commission's certainly welcome to disagree with that. But I mean, that's just kind of some of my thoughts.
So just to clarify, I did have the septic company send a letter, who have been around for over 20 plus years, to affirm that there was not the opportunity for an alternative site based on what we have in our backyard right now. And even that was difficult because we have a lot of oaks and other trees, and even finding that second backup septic was incredibly difficult, and to make the first septic work required a complete retooling of the architecture of the home. So I don't, with all due respect, I don't think that's you know, when I have someone that is an expert in their field, and these are the two options that we came up with. These really are the options that we came up with. If there was other ways to even get this to work, we would have had a side garage, because that would have been in compliance with the architectural demands of the HOA. But in just even having them on site, it was not even possible because of the tightness of the property to make it happen. So I would ask that you consider him a professional and expert in his statement that that really is the only sites that could be considered for the property.
Well, I want to make it clear that I'm not discrediting the individual. All it says in the letter is these are the only two sites available for on-site, systems for this property. I was hoping for a little bit more of an elaborate response. Maybe that's me being a novice and not knowing, but I'm not by any means discrediting this individual. They're a licensed septic installer. I see their name all over many septic reports. I don't doubt they know what they're doing. I just figured, you're advocating for a project, you'd go a little bit further in explaining why these are the only sites. You've done a good job of saying mature oaks and other things like that, but that's absent in his letter, and I guess that's what I was bringing up is all.
Well, I will say, if you might not notice, you guys are probably swamped with variance and building requests. And the fact that I even got them to acknowledge my email and send that, I am actually super grateful. So I think that if it wouldn't have been as a gong show of construction because of COVID, and hence even why I get that it can be a luxury, affording a pool is a luxury. I get that. But it's also, I do believe that there's room on the property for it. And with COVID and with a family, I just think it is for us something worth investing in, for everyone to feel comfortable and to be together. Going forward, I was gonna say, John, going forward, we're not in 1986, so we don't have to call a pool a luxury. I think it's a life choice, and I think there's some valid reasons why people would want to have pools for many reasons. So, again, at least, as I'm chairing this meeting, I would like to just, not buy into that 1986 language about, having a pool as a luxury, because I just don't think that that's really the case. So, I think that's a move. Go ahead, John.
I have a question for you, Nick.
Good, Gary.
Since if I read that correctly, they're asking for an 18-foot setback. So
Correct,
that would mean that. So that would mean that they would not meet the Minnehaha, and they're going to have to come up with another consideration on the lot to give property or wetland back.
Hi, Gary.
I will buffer, and as presented, yes.
Yes, Gary, as presented, it was at 18 feet, but since we have reduced the size of the pool to minimize the amount of retooling from, spending what I'm assuming is $5,000 to redo a wetland delineation survey and file an amendment, if we can just reduce the size of the pool from what was a bigger size to like a more of like a dipping pool, and it allows us to remove ourselves from some of the laborious efforts of getting approval. We are very much in favor of that, and in fact have already worked with Nick, who is from Performance Pools and on the call, in resizing the pool. So in fact, it would be within that 25 feet.
So Nick,
I guess personally, I would be a little more comfortable if I knew that you were meeting the watershed's requirements of 25 feet and asking me to come down to their requirements instead of asking me for a variance inside of their requirements.
So,
and I would say we're comfortable in this meeting saying that I don't know if I need to file. I'm not super familiar with this process because I've never done it, but we're very comfortable in saying that we can stay within the 25 feet, which is what Cole from the watershed said he would approve. Well, actually he doesn't need to approve.
So I
Gary,
guess my question is, then if we were to grant that at 25 feet, that would be something that you and your family could live with.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry, Gary, this is John. I completely agree with Gary. That's what I was going to say, and that's what I was going to ask Heather. I would like to just briefly, Nick from Performance Pools, can you just briefly tell us a little bit? I don't know if you have any expertise in salt water compared to chlorine. That got brought up by Gary.
And Nick, can you give us your first name and last name and address, please?
Yeah, you bet. So Nick Hawley, Hawley, and my address is 6575 Crosby Avenue in Inver Grove Heights. And yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about salt. Just to reiterate a couple of Heather's points there. Ultimately, it's there's the 25-foot wetland setback, and then on top of that, the 25-foot buffer to the wetland setback, which is really what's killing us here. Ultimately, when we get to the 25-foot original setback, there's a little space to play with some smaller sized pools to accommodate. It's that extra 25 foot that pretty much her septic, her drain field, and her drain field secondary is kind of eating up a lot of that space, and that's kind of what we're fighting into where we can do something with. And talking with Heather ultimately on site and everything, we're trying to work with the city, definitely trying to for sure work with the watershed as well. And from what we've learned from Cole with the watershed is ultimately they're pretty cool with anything 25 feet off of the wetland delineation, although they would entertain the allowance of up to 12.5 feet with some playing around with more or less a variance through them too. And so Heather is very comfortable finding a way to more or less be just the original 25 feet off and not the extra 25. It's that 50 feet that's kind of killing the space with the uniqueness of that property. So that's kind of where we're going at. We're trying to retool the size and the shape and ultimately the location to play within that setback. But in regards to salt versus chlorine and the effects of everything, I think one of the questions was like how many pools in Minnetrista have salt, and I can tell you, so I've been with Performance Pools for 16 years here, and in the last really about 15 years since salt has been pretty dominant, it's about 90 to 95% of our new pool construction is salt water. So it's a very, very high percentage. And salt does still convert into chlorine. I forget who mentioned that, but it does have a small conversion rate. And ultimately, in a swimming pool, specifically of a size that we're going with, there's going to be about 400 pounds of salt, which, it's hard for me to compare to other things, but it's a pretty small level, if you want to compare it to like a salt truck during snowplow season or something like that. And we have a few different systems on our pools that don't backflush anymore. And so older pool types will have what's called a sand filter, and that ultimately weekly disperses a little bit of water. And we do a cartridge system on the pool, so you don't have to actually lose any of the pool's water throughout the main season. And in the last 10 years, we've been able to do what's called underwater closings. So when we winterize the pool, we actually don't drain any water out of the swimming pool anymore. So the only time that a drain would occur is when a liner inside the swimming pool is replaced. And that's on average about every 15 years. So not super frequent, But typically I would say we drain into the street. I know there's not city sewer, I believe, out there. But that would typically be the case of what we would present. So in comparison to chlorine certainly has a more negative effect on natural surroundings. It's pretty harsh. It's harsh on people. It's harsh on, well, animals and natural life too. And salt converts into a smaller level, but I get into like the technicalities of like the EPA, I believe allows up to 4 parts per million of chlorine in drinking water actually. And we can actually maintain with salt a 1 to 3 parts per million chlorine residual, as it does a very slow conversion process throughout the time. So overall the chlorine amount is pretty small. The salt amount in the water is fairly small as well. So I'm not a natural habitat expert by any sense, but it is a very small residual that we deal with.
So Heather, what I'm hearing is it sounds like you're fine with 25 feet. I would agree with Gary that be much more comfortable if, with going from 50 to 25, if the Minnehaha watershed agrees with that as well. But that's what I'm hearing from both Heather, you and Nick. Nick from Performance.
Yeah, I agree to 25 feet, and I have in writing from Cole that the watershed that he also agrees to 25 feet and requires no variance.
Hey, I just want to keep track of this. Did we have anyone here did we say that we didn't have anyone for public hearing?
We haven't gotten to that point yet, as far as I can recall. But we haven't even opened it up yet. So I mean, at some point, please do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and open up for a public hearing, and then we can continue the discussion after that.
All right, there's not many people left on the meeting. There's still Ambrose. Do you wish to comment on this item at all?
I have no comment. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else here want to speak that hasn't had the chance to speak on this item?
Okay.
I don't hear anyone else, so.
Let's go ahead and close the public hearing. All right. Commissioners, you want to go ahead and let's discuss kind of what the verdict here. So I heard 12 and a half, and we got 12 and a half. We got 25. Nick, the request is 12 and a half, but we're talking about changing it to 25. Is that?
So the request is to reduce it down to 18. So you'd be looking, I guess, to change it to 25. And I guess the question becomes, it sounds like the Planning Commission is certainly willing to entertain this variance request. So obviously the question then would be, obviously it's not as presented. So would the Planning Commission themselves like to see this as a proposal at their next meeting? Or are they comfortable with giving the applicant direction and forwarding the recommendation onto the City Council? That's something the Planning Commission will also have to decide. But also keep in mind, if you are going to approve the variance request, you'll have to establish findings. Without knowing the nature of the direction of this request, those were not included within the staff reports. You'll have to look at, variance standards A and B, and then practical difficulties tests 1, 2, and 3, and make sure you check all those boxes. In the staff report I outlined, I certainly think either way is a plausible way to look at this. But as the Planning Commission, you'll have to establish those findings, so keep that in mind as well.
And then in addition to A and B, 1, 2, and 3, would it be feasible for us, I guess reasonable for us, I should say, for us to put an additional condition that the condition would meet or not exceed the Minnehaha Creek district?
Yeah, you probably have to rework condition 1. The condition 1, was basically with the idea that they would have to get an amended declaration. It sounds like they may not. However, the way I understand it, the city setback is measured to water's edge, but the watershed district is going to measure to the apron. Anything that's not native vegetation, is going to require an amended buffer declaration, might require some additional permitting. There's been discussions about moving this. I don't know to what extent, if that's everything out of the 25, if that's the water's edge only, I don't know. But I mean, there's semantics there that's going to determine, I suppose, if and what conditions you add to this request.
Nick, I'm happy to clarify that everything will be within 25 feet of the wetland buffer.
So it sounds like they would not need to obtain anything from the watershed district. However, I mean, they would, obviously need an updated number, because we'll need the resolution to reflect the project being approved. Variances are project specific. I mean, they are, unique to the property and unique to the request. They're not a catch-all, essentially. I mean, we'll need to see a site plan. We'll need to know a number for at least the city council meeting. If not, should the planning commission wish, I mean, you could certainly have them revise and bring it back to you at your next meeting. That's certainly within your roles.
The other thing I was going to add was, actually, I already talked about that, so I'm fine there. So, 123 city council meeting. Steve, can you comment on this? I haven't heard any feedback from you.
I think I'd like to see this come back to us. There's just too many moving parts here for me to be comfortable with approving this as written. And to Nick's point, there's a lot of staff things in here that we would have to redo ourselves. I would be more comfortable, I think, if they came back and showed us at least where this is going to go on the land and make sure that it's within the 25 feet. And Nick, you also mentioned something about the difference between where they measure the buffer zone. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, what I was getting at is, when it comes to swimming pool, city ordinance, measures the setback to the water's edge. We don't measure to any concrete apron or any shredding area around the pool. So from a setback standpoint, that's what we would be looking at. But from the watershed standpoint, they're looking for any non-native improvement, would have to stay outside the wetland buffer, which has been the indication of the applicant and her contractor. So based on what they're telling me, everything would be outside of the watershed district rules. No buffer amendment or declaration would be needed. However, an amended setback requirement would need to be, I guess, requested, or however you want to say it. But I mean, that setback distance would be changed.
Yep, that is correct. The apron, any construction, anything would all be outside of that 25 feet, aka nothing non-native.
And Heather, what size pool are you going to go down to then?
We're probably going to go down to a 12 by 20.
Oh, okay. So it is significantly smaller.
Significantly smaller. Yep. And I think it just makes the property is so unique and so small that I actually appreciate this exercise, because it really made us think more about what is necessary and what fits better on the property than what is maybe more standard that we started with.
I agree that I think that unfortunately I don't like putting people through extra hoops, but that I'd like to see this come back with all of the changes made to the request for the variance.
We do have a plan already drawn up within the setback, so it is it's not even up.
The problem is that if the variance isn't written, the request, if it is not written with those changes and it goes through, it would allow you to put it to change your mind and expand it to the way that the variance reads. So
the city council,
from that, I'd like to see it accurate.
Gary, Kathleen is on the call, and as part of the council, I mean, she would be able to share guidance to the council, and they would have final approval on the variance.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
So,
Mike, go ahead,
Damien?
please.
Damien, thank you, Damien. Nick, question. Did I understand that there is not an issue in terms of what happens to the contents of the pool? Or there's no stipulation as to how it's disposed of at end of season? Is that not an issue that we need to take on?
It's certainly up to you. I mean, I would think, I mean, I don't know if you're asking Nick, me, or Nick of Performance Pools.
I'm asking you, Nick Olson, just in terms of what we need to have.
I mean, you certainly, I would think that's a reasonable condition. If your concern is for the environment and how the pool water might impact it, I would think you certainly could condition its disposable when necessary in a certain manner. I mean, it's relating to the pool, it's relating to the request. I mean, I don't see why that's not viable.
So can I also weigh in or have Nick weigh in to reiterate that with the current construction of and the technology of the pool, it doesn't need to be emptied. So that is not a yearly requirement of a newer technology pool that needs to be taken into consideration. But I'm sure Nick of Performance Pools can probably say it a lot more eloquently than I can.
I would, thank you, Heather. I would kind of second what I believe Steve and Mike said. I think this is definitely worthy to take it to our next meeting before we go to the city council. And I would suggest having a site plan, setback confirmation within that, obviously. It show approval through the Minnehaha watershed that they have agreed to it.
I don't think it requires, at the 25, it doesn't require their approval, and that's what we're saying.
Okay, then
That's
at
correct.
least that we see that, Damien, and see that. And then also, I think, Damien, I think it is worth having Nick do a simple write-up, a simple 3 or 4 paragraph write-up of what he said, that we have that documented, so that we will always have that showing that there won't be contamination because they're not emptying the pool. He did say every 15 years when they have to change the cover, but once again, I think that bringing this back to our commission is worthy. And I also agree with Gary. I hate to make someone do something again, but I think it's worth that. I also heard from Nick Olson that, that maybe there could be, between Nick and Heather, maybe some more information that you could receive, Nick, where you and your staff are feeling a little bit more comfortable as well moving forward.
Thanks, John. I guess I'll share my opinion. I think it's pretty straightforward if they're willing to stay at the 25 feet. I think if we were to push this forward to the council, we can state, stipulations around that to, I guess, finalize the approval and keep it moving forward. I definitely am not comfortable with anything less than 25. I think the property is pretty unique. So again, we can kind of discuss, among ourselves, where we have, again, three people think that they should come back. And with the guidance that we've given, I think we can push it forward with that guidance to the city council. The city council are, filled with, extremely competent colleagues that I think will, enforce, I guess, our wishes. And obviously they'll have their own opinion on them. So
As an owner, or as the variance requester, or however you want to call it, would it be appropriate if this moved forward, that we had a stipulation of providing the site plan and the setback and showing approval from Cole, so that when the city council meets, all that is provided?
I would think that's a minimum to me, but know.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I'm just trying to make everyone feel comfortable that we're going to do what's right, to be able to move it forward to the city council. And if we, for whatever reason, don't provide that, then that is our fault.
I guess, Mike, do you have anything to weigh in on your stance? I mean, we know Damien is willing to move it forward, or Steve, John, and Gary seem willing to want to see it again. So I guess, where do you fall in? Maybe we can revisit Gary, Steve, and John.
I would fall in with Gary, Steve, and John at this point. The other question I have is, again, longevity-wise, the next owner down the road, what stipulations are we needing to put on the sale of the property in the future that says the pool cannot have chlorine, the pool cannot be dumped into the wetland? You know, it's already there in existence. Who's going to be keeping an eye on it? Do we put those kinds of restrictions in place, or as a resolution to this request?
Well, I think dumping into the wetland back to the technology of the pool isn't really an option. And we're actually looking at putting in a steel pool, which just means no liner, which means no dumping of like having to fix anything. So it has.
This is not about Heather. This is about the next owner or two down the road. That's what I was curious about. In other words.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Mike. I'm just clarifying that the reason for dumping the pool is due to liner faulty. But if there is no liner because it's made of steel, that removes the debate.
She just the way on a pool type. Sorry guys, this is like a little very clear. If there's not a liner inside the pool, we've entertained doing a completely stainless steel swimming pool, which would have no bladder replacement and essentially would completely eliminate any water drainage ever in the future. That has not been completely addressed, but it is a possibility if we got down that road.
I still haven't gotten my idea across. My idea across is to say, long after Nick at Performance Pools is gone, long after Heather Marley is gone, some owner, two owners down the road says, I bought a house, it has a pool, I'm in a hurry, I'm going to throw chlorine in there, my kids can't tolerate the risk of whatever, and now we're going to dump it out, and they're not paying attention to all the good things you guys are paying attention to, and they decide to dump it in there. That's my.
So Mike, I think what's practical for like this approval is really just to focus on the variance. I mean, there's just no way I'm just trying to be practical. There's no way the city has the ability to police any of that. And I think we're kind of deviating from really kind of what the main focus is. We really just got to take the property owner at her word and make that, assumption, and if we ended up, whether it's this meeting or the next meeting, we really kind of focus on the variance. I just don't see how the city, and I wouldn't want to put that on the city to be policing and setting that standard for us to police, pools in Minnetrista, period. But that's just my opinion. Nick, you might want to comment on that. I just don't know. I just don't see us having the ability to do that. And I mean, we're just going to have to take the property owner just like we take any other property owner at their word.
Yeah, I mean, it probably would be tough to enforce and to follow through with. I mean, I guess maybe it would go back to what's the concern of what is behind your concern? I mean, is it its proximity to the wetland? Is it
dumping chemicals in the wetland?
I mean, if there's concern there, I mean, it could be. I mean, maybe you reconsider allowing a pool at all. I mean, if we're concerned of it being that close. I mean, there's a 50-foot setback for a reason. It's not made up. It's not arbitrary. Obviously there are a variance situation, which is why we're here. So, I mean, if you can justify the variance, I mean, then we should alleviate the concern of dumping the pool and that type of thing. I think they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, if we're comfortable with it being 25 feet, I think to Damien's point, I mean, I think it'd be a great thing if we could do it. I just don't know how we would do it.
Well, we'd have to. I think we'd have to have a licensing procedure for pools, which I'm not suggesting we move into. I'm just saying that's part of what would be the only way to make that be controllable, and bigger hassle than this, obviously. So.
Well, I
Nick,
think
part of this, Nick, is I believe what I'm hearing from the rest of the commissioners is we seem to be comfortable at 25 with the assumption that that's what Minnehaha's watershed approval would be, not approval, but their guideline is. All right, number one. I think the other thing we're asking beyond that is just some documentation of it, because what I heard from you, Nick, and I'm talking about Nick Olson, is maybe there should be a little bit more information that should have been provided, number one. Number two is site plan. Heather mentioned she has that, so she can provide that. I'm assuming it's the new site plan that's 25 feet the setback.
correct.
And then all I would say is some documentation from Nick. If Nick from Performance Polls stating what has been discussed as far as potential contamination, how the pool is going to work. As Heather called it, it sounds like it's a state-of-the-art pool with steel and all that. I'm not an expert in that either. So with that said, Nick Olson, what I'd ask you is, I'm not trying to put the onus on you, but as we're all discussing this, Nick, are you comfortable if we taking this to city council, or would you prefer to have us go to a meeting next month to discuss it, or something in the middle? What is your recommendation, Nick? I know you're looking for ours, but what is yours?
Well, I don't think there's anything really in between. I think there's two options of the planning commission at this point. I mean, we've crossed number one off the list, and this is a request we're willing to consider. So I mean, now we can move forward to the request itself. Now, obviously, there's been discussions of changes from what was presented. I mean, obviously, I can understand the concern that Mike, John, Steve, and Gary present. The applicant is suggesting numerous changes to the request that are different than what was presented, stuff they did not have to review. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for you guys to request that those revisions come back to you and make sure you're 100% on board with what they're presenting before it goes forward to the city council. Because if you simply say, hey, yeah, stay 25 feet from the wetland, who's to say where that pool goes? I mean, it's probably going to stay in the same general area, but I mean, 20, that opens up the door a lot more than 50 feet. So there might be a few areas that maybe one area is more preferable to the other. I mean, the planning commission has to decide if their really true desire is to see that, or if they're comfortable with the city council taking the comments that they're providing and applying them appropriately. Because I mean, at the very least, Heather's got to present this to the city council with the amended documents you're requesting. The question is, do you guys want to see it first? And I don't think there's a preference either way. I mean, obviously, they've got 2 weeks until the next city council meeting. So there's a little bit of time. There's that extra week built in because of the 5th Monday. So, I mean, it's not like it's turned around in a week. If it was turned around a week, I would say come back to the next month planning commission, no questions asked. But you have an extra week. Are you comfortable enough? I mean, early indications is it was 4-1 that you're not comfortable, that you'd like to see it again. I think that's perfectly reasonable and it perfectly makes sense. But remember, you still also have to justify this request. You can't just say, sure, sounds good. Why does it sound good? Why is it consistent with our ordinances, consistent with our comprehensive plan? Why is it reasonable? Why is it, what is unique about the property? And what is, how is it keeping in character with the neighborhood? I mean, this is not the only parcel that has wetlands in this neighborhood that might need a variance in the future. So I mean, does anyone else have a wetland setback like this in the neighborhood? Things like that to consider. So you got to also justify the request. So I mean, are you comfortable doing that all tonight? Justifying the variance to forward a recommendation to the city council, contingent upon receiving updated documents that might look one of many different ways. It's just for you guys to decide.
And I will say, as an owner, we can absolutely come to the table with all of the asks and requirements that you guys are looking for. So from our standpoint, we have no issue in getting or showing the documentation around the Minnehaha watershed approval with no variance requested from them, the new site plan, location, and overall design and size. So just so you know that there's from approval today, there would be no concern on our side to be able to deliver.
So Heather, this is
Is that
Steve. I
by
have a quick
June
question.
7th or by next June's planning commission?
I think that was a question to you, Heather.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Please ask again.
I mean, you have until June 7th. I mean, Nick, Heather, are you able to turn that around in that short amount of time for the city council? I mean, you probably have about a week.
I can get everything.
Well,
I can get everything realistically in about a week that you guys would need that would meet 100% of the 25-foot setback.
Nick,
So it certainly seems that they can get the stuff by the planning committee or the city council.
Heather, is
Steve,
there
yeah.
a timeline
Excuse
that
me, Nick
you're
Olson?
under?
Excuse me. That would have to be the Thursday before the council meeting,
Right,
because
it's like a
otherwise
week and
it
a
would
half.
not get in the council chip packets.
Yeah, it's like a week and
Well,
a half. Right?
just to clarify, they don't have until June 7th.
Right. We would have. What would that date be? That would be.
Based on a calendar, I mean, we'd need it by June 2nd. I'm gonna say.
Oh,
June
easy.
2nd.
Done deal, guys. Easy.
Heather, I have a question for you, and this is not going to sway myself or any of us either other way, but in fairness to you, by waiting, if we had to wait for you to come back to planning commission, what does that do with your plan?
Well, we have, and I'm all about transparency in my businesses and how I work. So I'll be completely honest. It's taken us a long time with Nick to figure out, and we Nick from Performance Pools and talking to Nicholas and talking to the watershed, just to even get to this point. But I believe we're slated ideally in an all perfect world for July to start. So if we delay it, it may push us. Well, I know it will push us out, but Nick would probably have to look at his scheduling to understand how much that jacks up the schedule for him. That's not really for me to say. I just know when they anticipated us starting the project. Hence why we're really trying to be super transparent and advocate for us and be really flexible so that we can start the project when we were hoping to, because we started the conversation last year.
And please understand, we do not want to delay this if we don't need to. But one of the things that I'm hearing is, and I personally feel, Heather, is I think this is something that could be and will be done. But I do think my vote is probably, Heather, going to be that it comes back to commission. And as long as all of that's, it's solid and we go through, it should be very quick next time and get to but it probably means it's not going to be getting to the city council until July. But that, and I'm the last one that wants to delay anything, believe me. I just think that to solidify it, and that way it's going to be a lot cleaner for you, even if we approve it, and once we approve it, to get it through city council.
I would concur.
Muted, Damien.
Steve, you had a question before?
John covered the timeline issue, but I did have one question for Nick. Procedurally, if we recommended not to, if we put forth the thing that said we didn't recommend that they move forward, they could still take it to the city council, correct? They would just not have
right.
our approval on it.
It would get forwarded to the city council with a recommendation of denial.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with John. I mean, the last thing I want to do, Heather, is muck up your timeline or mess with your plans. But there's just too many unknowns for me, unfortunately.
Well, you guys, the only other option is a above ground pool in the center of the cul-de-sac. I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Is that a community
Oh,
pool
that's a
then? Can
joke.
anybody
What
come
I'm
by?
doing.
Smile.
Hey, Nick, well, let's since we have a consensus across the board, their option, I guess I think it's pretty straightforward. I think, what we're asking for is the council can, evaluate it from there, as long as it met that. But, as my fellow commissioners have stated, what are her options right now? Do we clearly lay it out for her so there's, clarity in what this body wants to see, or what options do we have right now?
Well, we have a few different options. You obviously have the ability to approve or deny the request as presented. You have an ability to request changes to the submittal, and then that submittal can either be forwarded back to use the planning commission for your June meeting, or forwarded with comments to the city council. So you either send it forward to the council with a recommendation of approval with conditions and changes, forward it with approval as is, deny it as presented, all to the council, or you could ask for the revisions to come back to you in June. So I suppose you have 4 options.
Four of us want to see it back in June, correct? Mike, is that the case? Steve? Gary? John?
Yep.
Anybody change your mind?
That is correct.
Yeah.
I don't know.
At this point, I would think. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I'm thinking back to my, my training, and really our job is to look at this and make sure that we do our due diligence. So I'm on the fence, Damien, right? We could certainly sit here and go through these A, B, and 1, 2, and 3 and make up some verbiage or put forth some verbiage.
No, I'm totally fine with what you guys are saying, but what I want to do is make sure that we're clear on what we're asking of Heather, and we are communicating with her so that she understands what she's being asked to do, and then she comes back and she can present to us just that. So I just wanted to make sure that what we're asking is for her to come back in June, present, and that is, I want to make sure that Steve, Gary, John, Mike, you guys come to a consensus on what you're asking her to present in June back to this body before it goes to the city council.
Damien, it's John. Please, I want to make sure I get this right. I know when I mentioned this, Heather reiterated it, so I think it's clear. But what my understanding is that a wetland setback variance reduced the required setback from 50 to 18 feet. I don't know, Nick Olson, if we need to have anything in there saying that in compliance with the Minnehaha watershed approval. If not, then we don't. A site plan showing the setback.
We wanted.
Hold on,
John. Just to back you up, John. We want it to 25 feet, not from 50 to 18. They're requesting.
Right. If you're making changes to the request, you can disregard the motion in your staff report. You'll have to make one up. Basically, you'd make a motion to the effect of tabling the request, and direct the applicant to bring back, the following bits of information and whatever they are that you would like to see. So, the motion in the direction that the planning commission seems to be looking to go would be different than the one presented in the staff report. So you'd have to, I guess, John, if you've been taking notes and you've got a list of the things you want to see, the motion to the effect would be, table the request until June, whatever a calendar tells me, I think it's June the 28th, provided they supply us with a list of items and whatever that list may be.
So where you just started, Nick, I'll continue and please others chime in. Yes, I meant to say 25 if I said 18, so that the variance to reduce to a required setback from 50 feet to 25 feet. They would include a final site plan with the confirmation of the setback. And I would also like to see some documentation from Nick from Performance Pools stating what he stated on this call, and which, you know, regarding being able to do the pool within that setback. Because it did get brought up, I would think it would be nice to have in there that what he said about the salt water and the how the pool is the way it's made. And then I want to ask the commission if you guys think we should have something in there stating that it complies with the Minnehaha watershed guidelines of the 25 feet.
I think we should, because that's what we were discussing. That's where I think everybody was, at least was happy with meeting the Minnehaha Creek requirements.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see language like that in there.
Could I ask one question? What is, and just help me understand, because this is not my world.
Sure.
But what is the difference between approval now with contingencies versus having another meeting and then approval?
Because we want to see I want to see your design. I want to see your layout. I want to see what's approved by the watershed.
So
there's too many moving parts here.
Excuse me, Gary, hold on one second. Heather, so the difference would be you get a, this body would likely decline the request as a recommendation to city council, and the city council would actually have to, would make the final decision, you know, essentially. So it's the, I guess what we're trying to do is give you the opportunity to get the support of this body to the council, which we assume would help your efforts in getting the poll done.
Got it.
So,
Got it. So there's enough unknown that where if I present this with confidence that if I do what I say and I follow through and you guys feel comfortable that there's enough unknown that once you see it, there's confidence then in pushing it forward and giving the support.
Exactly. So, but that support would have to come in the next meeting. And otherwise, you know, you're likely not to get that support, and the city council would have to, you know, make a decision from there. So,
okay, understood. I just wanted a little clarification, so thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
And understand that the good news from what I am hearing is that if everything that's been said today, we see that, and to Damien's point, then we approve that. I don't see an issue of not approving that, is what I'm hearing, Heather.
Did
So,
Nicholas also put in my proposal that city council meetings can be held at the pool?
Right. Okay.
Oh. Okay.
Well,
maybe that didn't make it clear.
That's not allowed.
Definitely might appreciate that.
Heather,
I'm just teasing, guys.
I do have a question for you, Heather.
Only to bring the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. to add to the complication.
Heather, I have a question, not kind of off subject, but do you have a family members of the name Juniper and Trout?
Oh my God, yes I do.
Okay, that's funny. Okay.
How do you know this?
Because well, we're being taped here, so this should be a side note. You're one of my very good customers, by the way, at Adago.
Oh my God, John, you know all my Borzois. I knew you looked familiar. I don't ever see your last name. Wonderful to see you.
Heather's been a customer of ours for, I guess, the day we opened. So she's, yeah. All right. Anyway.
Yeah, you guys are
I thought
amazing.
that was you.
All right. Well, we should. John has a motion on the table. We should seek a second of that motion. unless John has anything to add to his motion.
Right.
He got tailed off at the MCWD comments.
I would second John's motion.
Did you have anything to add to it, John, or was the MCWD your last bit?
Well, I'm not sure what you wrote down, but I want the last part of what I said. I want to make sure is that we've got the Minnehaha watershed that we're equal to what they are at the 25, and that we have some documentation from Nick at Performance Polls regarding not just the site plan, but what he discussed regarding how the water is flushed, how it's not flushed, all of that specific detail.
Can we get the recommendation read back to us?
I guess I'll do the best I can as to what I captured in John's motion. John, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So a motion would be to table the request and have the applicant resubmit the following documentation for the June Planning Commission meeting. Item 1 being reduce the setback request from 18 to 25 feet, or I guess increase the setback, reduce the setback variance request. Provide an updated site plan showing that setback being adhered to as requested. Receive documentation from Nick with Performance Pools on the notes and comments he provided at the Planning Commission meeting. And then some sort of verification or documentation from Minnehaha Creek Watershed District that if the applicant moves to 25 feet, that they're in compliance with their rules and regulations and requirements.
That's correct.
Beautiful.
Second.
Chris, your turn.
I'm sorry, was that, who seconded? I got John as it.
Mike Kirkwood.
Oh, Mike, okay, thank you.
I would like to say from a character perspective, and also Heather is a wonderful person, but also she's won many awards. So I trust in over the last 10 years, what she says she'll do, and getting that documentation will solidify that. So I'm very comfortable with that.
Thank you, John. And thank you for everyone for listening. This took longer than I think a 6-acre development, but I'm super passionate about it. And I appreciate your patience in walking through it. Everyone needs to feel comfortable. This needs to be a consensual installation of a pool. So thank you for the time on this because it's late. I appreciate it.
Thank you for understanding.
So
before you go, Heather, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, I need to do a roll call vote. Excuse my voice. Acting Chair Damian Young.
Aye.
Gary Pettis.
Aye.
John Sturgis.
Aye.
Mike Kirkwood.
Aye.
And Steve Livermore.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passed 5-0, so that will come back at the June 28th council meeting.
So give me 1 second, guys. Heather, do you have any questions?
Not council meeting, excuse me, planning commission.
Planning commission meeting. Heather, do you have any questions about what this body just asked you to provide for that next planning commission meeting?
I feel like I may have missed one item, but let me reiterate: an updated plan site, affirmation, and maybe just even a statement from the watershed of approval of 25 feet and more without variance request. An overview from Nick from Performance Pools of saltwater impact, and environmental impact. What else am I missing?
Just Nick, is she putting in a new application in for 25?
That will be the submittals will reflect that. There's no new application.
Okay. All right.
But the submittals will reflect 25 feet.
Got it. So I think you're I think you're good, Heather. So thank you for
And
your
assuming
time.
you meet all the
Appreciate your
conditions, then it
patience.
sounds like this body will be willing to consider a recommendation of approval. So get all those items in order, and assuming they align with what they're after, you could be receiving some positive feedback.
Awesome, you guys. Thank you for everything. I really appreciate the discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They have June 28th, I think, is the tentative date for the next planning commission.
Perfect. I'll make sure it's on my calendar.
All right. Thank you.
Nick, on the next meeting, do we need to reprint what must have been 30 pages of how the sewer system works on the property?
Probably not. I mean, the staff report will be changed. I mean, yeah, I probably won't put all that information. You've seen it once, and it's on the record. I mean, it didn't seem. I mean, it had some impact on your decision, but hopefully it'll be a parceled down staff report.
You looking for a motion for adjournment?
Well, I mean, we can run down the staff and council updates. I don't really have anything to add. No new applications coming forward. I mean, obviously we'll see Heather back next month. Remains to be seen. I don't know if we'll see the 92 in a West Highland quickly in June, but I guess that remains to be seen. I mean, that's, I guess, what I've got. We'll let Kathleen from council if she's got anything for her updates.
Not much. I'm just gonna let you guys know we approved the MSA project for 2021 Sunnyfield Road by the high school there. That should be mostly done by August 27th. They're gonna work over the summer as to not affect school. The 2021 street improvement projects, so all the local roads were approved for utility work. The utility work will be mostly completed by September 3rd, and the streets will mostly be completed by the end of October. We are continuing our broadband discussions. We had a good presentation from Extra Time and Lakeside about expanding internet access, and we'll discuss it again at our June 21st meeting. The updated solar energy system ordinance was approved at the first May meeting on May 3rd. As of now, National Night Out in August is a go. Nothing more really about that yet, just Chief Falls said he's open to it. And at the next meeting, June 7th, we'll make a final decision on Trista Day for September. That's all I've got, unless you guys have questions.
Hey, Kathleen, it's Steve Littlemore. I got a notice in the mail from Sprint about them providing Wi-Fi to the home.
Okay.
Did you guys talk about that at all, or?
Not with Sprint. No, we have not had anything from Sprint, actually.
So those are typically like MiFis that they're advertising, which is just basically cellular.
Right, it's 5G. It's 5G, but it was unlimited, or well, not unlimited, but it was home 5G for the home, right? So I'm assuming they had some package in there.
It'd be T-Mobile, not Sprint, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a standard advertising. I mean, I would double check because their 5G coverage is spotty in Minnetrista. So I think it's just marketing.
Yeah, I found it interesting, right? Because Verizon came out with their rollout, right? But it's not available in our area at this time, right? So I didn't know if T-Mobile, to your point, I was a little skeptical as well. I was just wondering if they had reached out to the council at all and try and sell the service there as well. That's all.
No, they haven't. I know they're on our towers already though for their cell phone service, so they wouldn't necessarily reach out for anything else, I don't think.
Okay. Just curious.
So with the 5G service, and just to share this with you, it's unlimited, but after a certain amount, they throttle it and it goes down to a lower speed, even though it says unlimited. So I know that because I deal with it for business all the time.
Right. Yep. I just found it interesting that they were actually out promoting it, right? But
Right.
I guess they're trying to get customer base.
They are. Kathleen, can you elaborate a little bit on the internet? I guess you said
Yeah,
what company this thing was?
Extra Time and Lakeside. Extra Time is located more west. They did a really good presentation, showed us where they thought they would need microcells, and then they would likely go on top of our water towers to expand their service. We had a list of questions, and Allie with staff is going to put together a spreadsheet for the next broadband meeting in mid-June, kind of laying out everything they offer, how much it would cost to expand it, and what this, how far they'd reach, when they could get to the underserved areas, which is mostly, I guess, on the northwestern side of the city more so than for us down here off 7. Lakeside had a pretty good. Go ahead.
Is that a private LTE? Because that doesn't sound like it's broadband.
Yeah, well, I guess it's wireless internet. Eventually they could put fiber in pending their coverage.
Yeah. Okay, so a private okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. So it'd be a private LTE. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So what's the speed on that? What's the speed on that? Did they say, Kathleen?
Yeah, they did. Let me find that document here quick. I know
Those are
it
usually
exceeds.
pretty slow.
From what they said, it exceeds what the baseline is for standard. Here is the document.
100 megabit?
Yeah, that was in there. Where's the?
Okay.
Sorry, I gotta find the paper.
And did they have
Steve and I are a bunch of IT nerds, so
they said their new installs get speeds in the 100 to 300 Mbps range. They can also deliver gigabyte speeds to those who need it. Most consumers are happy with the 100 though.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that would. And did they have a cost for the consumer?
The monthly cost after install and everything, they range from $15 to $150. The big thing with them is putting in the microcells, which are quite expensive. So that's where we would look at what the city wants to cover versus what kind of, contract or anything we'd work out with that. But the monthly cost didn't seem out of what everyone else offers for that.
So, the one thing I would ask, right, is the city have access to, MnDOT and Met Council, they have basically, if you're talking cellular and private LTE, they have like essentially some bandwidth that's existing. I don't know if we've ever talked to them or talked to the state about being able to leverage some of that bandwidth, but that's interesting. What I need to do is just go to one of those meetings one time and just kind of hear out myself. You were gonna elaborate on the next company?
Yep, the other one is, I just said it, Lakeside. They're based out here, I think actually out of Excelsior, Lakeside Networks. And they offer, they're currently providing services to cities Deep Haven and Excelsior, Shorewood. They would look to put stuff on our water towers and expand their fixed wireless coverage that way. Their presentation had a couple maps that we couldn't really make out where if they would reach our underserved areas as well. So we asked them to come back with some more detailed maps and just get us more information in general. I'd say the Extra Time presentation was a lot more detailed with more info. Lakeside didn't really give us a good cost estimate or anything like that, other than how much it would cost to deploy a new LTE tower. So yeah, we just need more information from them. But
So
the 21st work session is going to talk about that more.
So is the city trying to be the provider and they're going to be charging the customers and then they have to cover the upfront cost?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. We're just looking at finding out who could provide it and then what the infrastructure would cost the city if we wanted to speed up the process of getting it, kind of like when we, contract with MediaCom to put in the cables and all that and how we negotiate the contract with them. But no, the city wouldn't cover the monthly cost or anything like that.
Well, charge the citizens. Okay, got it.
Yeah, we wouldn't be the go-between. We would just be the, the way to get the infrastructure in, similar to MediaCom, like I said.
Got it.
But any other questions on the broadband / internet?
I'm good. The 21st, you said?
Yeah, as of now, I think it's 5:30 that meeting will start. So
awesome.
But yeah, narrowing down the options, which is nice. Any other questions? All right, that's all I got.
Good. So anything else, Nick? We got a motion to wrap this up?
Correct.
Okay, anybody? Oh, I'll jump at it.
I'll do it. I'll move we adjourn.
I'll second that.
I second. Too late.
I'm sorry, who seconds that?
Young.
Okay. All right, roll call motion to do the adjournment. Acting Chair Damian Young.
Aye.
Gary Pettis.
Aye.
John Sturgis.
Aye.
Mike Kirkwood.
Aye.
And Steve Livermore.
Aye.
Okay, the Planning Commission meeting is adjourned at 10:21.